"Jungkook, I didn't do it. Taehyung did this." Jimin's voice broke across the hospital room, but before anyone could answer, Jungkook slowly raised his head from the pillow, looked directly at Jimin, and slapped him. The room went completely silent. Jimin froze, his hand trembling against his cheek. "You really think I'm going to believe you after everything you've hidden?" Jungkook whispered. Then Suga suddenly stumbled backward, grabbed the edge of the chair, and collapsed. But what happened minutes earlier on that stage had left one question nobody was ready to answer. Why had Jimin blamed Taehyung when Jungkook was the one who almost lost everything? Stay with this story, because the truth behind that night was something the public never saw. Before we continue, tell me in the comments where you're watching from, and if you want more intense BTS drama stories like this, subscribe, like and share this channel, because tonight we are going back to a moment that stayed hidden for far too long. The hospital room had been quiet just minutes before Jimin walked in. Jungkook was lying injured after collapsing during a performance, his body exhausted, his voice barely strong enough to speak. RM was standing near the window, trying to keep everyone calm. Jin kept checking the door. J-Hope was sitting silently with both hands locked together. Taehyung stood against the wall, pale and unable to look at anyone. And Suga already knew something was wrong. Then Jimin entered, looked at Taehyung, and said the words that changed everything. It was him. Taehyung caused what happened to Jungkook. Nobody moved. Jungkook slowly opened his eyes. Taehyung stared at Jimin as if he had just been betrayed by the one person he trusted most. "Why are you saying that?" Taehyung asked quietly. Jimin didn't answer. He only looked toward Jungkook. But Jungkook's expression had already changed. He remembered something from the stage. Something Jimin didn't know he remembered. And when Jungkook finally spoke, everyone in that room realized this was no longer about an accident. It was about a secret that had been hidden between them for much longer than anyone imagined. The first thing Jungkook remembered after opening his eyes was the ceiling. White, too bright, too still. For several seconds, he couldn't understand where he was. His body felt heavy, especially his left shoulder and his ribs. Every breath seemed to remind him that something had gone terribly wrong. Then he heard voices outside the room. The doctor said he needs complete rest. That was RM. His voice was low, controlled. But Jungkook could hear the fear underneath it. Another voice answered. "Jin, rest isn't the problem. The problem is what happened before he fell." Jungkook closed his eyes again. A flash suddenly returned to him. The stage, the lights. Thousands of people screaming, the music shaking the floor. He remembered turning toward the other members. He remembered seeing Taehyung several steps away. Then something moved behind him. A sudden impact. His foot slipped. His body lost balance. He remembered reaching for something that wasn't there. Then the lights seemed to spin. Jungkook opened his eyes. "What happened?" His voice was weak. The room immediately became silent. RM turned around. Jin stood beside the bed. J-Hope looked relieved. Suga remained near the corner, staring at Jungkook with an expression that Jungkook couldn't understand. "You're awake," Jin said quietly. Jungkook tried to sit up, but pain shot through his side. "Don't move," RM warned. "You fell during the performance." Jungkook swallowed. "Taehyung?" Nobody answered immediately. That silence told him more than words could. Jungkook looked around the room. "Where is he?" Suga finally spoke. "Outside." Jungkook frowned. "Why?" Suga looked at RM, looked at Jin. None of them wanted to answer. Then the door opened. Taehyung stepped inside. His face looked exhausted. His hair was messy, his eyes red, and there was a small cut near his eyebrow. He stopped when he saw Jungkook awake. "Jungkook." His voice cracked. Jungkook stared at him. For a moment, neither spoke. Taehyung moved closer. "I'm sorry." Jungkook's eyebrows tightened. "For what?" Taehyung looked down. "For not getting to you fast enough." Jungkook shook his head. "That wasn't your fault." Taehyung looked up sharply. Before he could say anything else, the door opened again. Jimin entered. His breathing was uneven. He looked like someone who had been running through the hospital. His eyes immediately went to Jungkook, then to Taehyung. Something changed in his face. "You shouldn't be here," Jimin said. Taehyung froze. "What?" "I said you shouldn't be here." RM stepped forward. Jimin, calm down. But Jimin didn't listen. He moved closer to the bed. Jungkook, you need to know what happened. Jungkook stared at him. I know I fell. No, Jimin said. You don't know why. The room became tense again. Taehyung slowly turned toward Jimin. What are you talking about? Jimin looked directly at him. You know exactly what I'm talking about. I don't. Stop lying. Taehyung's face changed. I'm not lying. Jimin's hands began to shake. Jungkook noticed it immediately. Jimin looked frightened, not angry, and somehow that frightened Jungkook more. Tell him, Jimin said. Taehyung stared at him. Tell him what? Jimin took a breath. Tell Jungkook what you did before he fell. Taehyung stepped backward. I didn't do anything. You pushed him. The words landed like a shockwave. Jin's eyes widened. J-Hope stood up. RM immediately said, Jimin. But Jimin continued. I saw you. Taehyung stared at him in disbelief. You saw me? Yes. Then why didn't you say anything before? Jimin looked toward Jungkook. He had no answer. That was the first crack in his story. Jungkook slowly turned his head toward Taehyung. Did you touch me? Taehyung's eyes filled with tears. I grabbed your arm. Jungkook's expression hardened. Before I fell, yes. Why? Taehyung looked at the floor. Because something was wrong. Jimin immediately interrupted. There, you heard him. He said he grabbed my arm, Jungkook replied. Not pushed me. Jimin stared at him. Jungkook, you don't understand. Then explain it. Jimin opened his mouth, but nothing came out. Suga watched him carefully. He had been silent for too long. Finally, he spoke. Jimin, where were you standing when Jungkook fell? Jimin looked at him. Behind them. Suga's eyes narrowed. Behind them? Yes. Then how did you see Taehyung push Jungkook? Jimin went completely still. Taehyung looked at Suga. RM slowly turned toward Jimin. Jin's expression became serious. Jimin swallowed. I saw enough. Suga shook his head. That's not what I asked. Jimin's voice became quieter. I saw what I needed to see. Jungkook stared at him. Those words made something inside him drop, because suddenly he remembered the stage again. He remembered Taehyung reaching toward him, but he also remembered another figure moving behind him, someone much closer, someone whose voice he had heard right before everything went black. Jimin, Jungkook said. Jimin looked at him. Yes? Jungkook's voice was quiet. Were you behind me? Jimin's face went pale. Nobody spoke. Jungkook continued. Before I fell. Jimin looked away. That was all the answer Jungkook needed. You were, Jimin whispered. I was trying to help you. Then why blame Taehyung? Jimin's eyes filled with tears. Because you wouldn't believe me otherwise. Taehyung stepped forward. Believe you about what? Jimin looked at him, and for the first time, fear replaced anger in his eyes. About what happened backstage. Everyone turned toward him. RM asked, what happened backstage? Jimin didn't answer. Jungkook stared at him. Tell them. Jimin shook his head. Not here. Why? Because someone is listening. Suga immediately looked toward the door. Jin locked eyes with RM. J-Hope whispered, what do you mean someone is listening? Jimin stepped closer to Jungkook and lowered his voice. The accident wasn't supposed to happen. Jungkook felt his stomach tighten. What are you saying? Jimin looked toward Taehyung. Someone wanted you hurt. Taehyung's face went blank. And you think it was me? Jimin didn't answer. Suga suddenly stepped between them. Enough. His voice was sharper than anyone expected. Nobody leaves this room until we know exactly what happened. But before anyone could respond, Jungkook's phone, sitting on the table beside his hospital bed, suddenly lit up. One message appeared on the screen. No name, no number, just 3 words. You remember wrong. Jungkook stared at the message. Then another message appeared. Ask Jimin why. And that was when Jungkook realized the accident on stage might have been only the beginning.
Jungkook kept staring at the phone. Nobody in the room knew what was written on the screen yet, but they could see the change in his face. His breathing became slower. His eyes stopped moving. It was as if something he had been trying to remember was suddenly being forced back into his mind. What is it? Rem asked. Jungkook didn't answer. Jimin noticed the phone first. His face immediately changed. Don't read it. Jungkook looked at him. Why? Because you don't know I sent it and neither do you? Jimin stepped closer. Jungkook, please. That one word made Taehyung look at him. How do you know it's dangerous? Jimin froze. Taehyung continued. You haven't even seen the message. Jimin's silence was enough to make the entire room uncomfortable. Suga slowly walked toward the bed. "Jungkook, show me." Jungkook turned the phone toward him. Suga read the message once, then again. His expression hardened. "Who has this number?" Jin asked. "Only people close to us," Jungkook replied. RM immediately reached for his own phone. "We need to find out if the message came from inside the staff system." J-Hope looked toward the hallway. What if someone has access to the hospital? Nobody answered. The thought was too disturbing. Jungkook looked at Jimin again. "You said someone wanted me hurt." Jimin nodded slowly. "Yes, how do you know?" Jimin hesitated. "Because I heard something." "What? A conversation? Between who?" Jimin looked at TAEHYUNG. "I can't say." TAEHYUNG's expression turned cold. "You accuse me in front of everyone, but you can't even tell us who you heard?" Jimin shook his head. "It's not that simple." "It is simple," TAEHYUNG replied. "You blamed me because I thought you were involved." "You thought?" TAEHYUNG almost laughed, but there was no humor in it. "You ruined everything with one sentence because you thought." Jungkook watched them both. Something about Jimin's behavior felt wrong. He knew Jimin. He knew when Jimin was angry, when he was scared, and when he was hiding something. Right now, Jimin wasn't angry. He was terrified, Jimin. Jungkook said quietly. "Look at me." Jimin did. "Did you know something was going to happen tonight?" Jimin's eyes immediately filled with tears. He looked away. Jungkook's voice became firmer. "Answer me. I knew there was a problem." "What problem?" "Someone warned me." RM stepped forward. "Someone warned you that Jungkook would get hurt?" Jimin nodded. "When?" "Before the performance." Jin's eyes widened. "And you didn't tell anyone?" "I was going to." "When?" Suga asked. Jimin looked at him. "After the show." Suga's expression darkened. Why after the show? Jimin couldn't answer. Suga moved closer. "Jimin, someone sent you a warning. You kept it secret. Then Jungkook gets injured. Then you accuse TAEHYUNG. Now you say someone else is behind it. Do you understand why nobody knows what to believe?" Jimin's lips trembled. "Because I was trying to protect him." Jungkook stared at him. "Protect me from what?" Jimin looked at Jungkook, but before he could answer, the hospital door opened. A nurse walked in carrying a small envelope. "Jungkook?" Everyone turned. "This was left at the front desk for you." Jungkook frowned. "Who brought it?" "A man." "What man?" The nurse shook her head. "He didn't give a name." She placed the envelope on the table. Jimin immediately stepped backward. Taehyung noticed. "You know that envelope?" Jimin said nothing. Jungkook reached for it. "Don't!" Jimin whispered. Jungkook stopped. "Why?" "Because that's what they wanted." "Who?" Jimin looked toward the door. "The person who sent the warning." Jungkook opened the envelope anyway. Inside was a photograph. It showed the stage from a distance. Jungkook was visible near the center. Taehyung was standing several steps behind him. Jimin was farther away, but someone had circled a small figure near the side of the stage. Jungkook leaned closer. "Who is that?" RM asked. Suga took the photograph. "Zoom in." Jin pulled out his phone and photographed it. The figure appeared to be one of the stage crew members, but there was something else. On the back of the photograph was a handwritten sentence. "Didn't push Jungkook. He saved him." Taehyung stared at the words. "Saved him?" Jungkook slowly looked at Taehyung. Taehyung's eyes were already wet. "I told you," he whispered. "I grabbed you because something hit the equipment behind you." Jungkook remembered. A loud metallic sound. A flash. Taehyung's hand. Then falling, Jimin suddenly spoke. "That's not the whole story." Everyone turned toward him. "What else?" Jungkook asked. Jimin shook his head. "There was another person." Suga's eyes narrowed. "Who?" Jimin whispered. "Someone who was standing beside me." The room went silent. Asked, "Who?" Jimin looked at Jungkook. "Someone you trust." Jungkook felt his chest tighten. "Who?" Jimin couldn't answer. Then Taehyung noticed something written beneath the photograph. A second line. "Ask the person, turned off, the safety system." Taehyung looked at RM. "The safety system?" RM immediately called the production manager. Jin started checking the performance records. J-Hope moved toward the door and asked security to restrict the hallway. Suga stayed beside Jungkook, but Jimin remained completely still. Jungkook watched him. "You already knew about the safety system." Jimin looked up. "What?" "You reacted before anyone explained it." Jimin's eyes widened. Jungkook slowly pushed himself higher against the pillow despite the pain. "You knew, Jungkook." "Tell me the truth." "I was scared." "Of what?" Jimin's voice broke. "Of losing you." Jungkook stared at him. "Then why did you lie?" Jimin covered his mouth, fighting back tears. Because if I told you the truth, you would go after them. Who? Jimin looked at the door. I can't say. Suga suddenly turned toward him. Then someone is controlling you. Jimin said nothing. Suga stepped closer. Are they threatening you? Jimin's eyes finally met his. For a second, nobody breathed. Then Jimin whispered, They have something that belongs to Jungkook. Jungkook's face changed. What? Jimin shook his head. Something from before, what? Jimin looked at him. Before you ever became famous, and that was the moment. Jungkook realized the person behind the accident might know a secret about him that even the other members had never heard.
Jungkook stared at Jimin as if the room had suddenly become unfamiliar. Something from before I became famous, he repeated. Jimin nodded, but his eyes stayed lowered. What does that mean? Jungkook asked. I don't know how much they know. Completely. Jimin whispered. Then tell me what you know. Jimin swallowed. Years ago, before all of this, someone recorded something about you. Jin frowned. Recorded what? I don't know. You expect us to believe that? Taehyung asked. Jimin looked at him. Completely. I'm not asking you to believe me. Then stop accusing me. Jimin flinched. Jungkook noticed. Jimin, you blamed Taehyung because you were scared. Yes, but you still blamed him. I know. Why? Jimin looked at Jungkook for a long moment. Completely. Because the person who warned me told me that if I didn't make everyone believe Taehyung was responsible, they would release the recording. Jungkook's face went still. RM asked, What recording? Jimin shook his head. I never saw it. Completely. Suga immediately asked, Then how do you know it exists? They sent me one screenshot. Where is it? Jimin hesitated. I deleted it. Suga's expression hardened. Why? Because they told me deleting it was the only way they would stop. Completely. Jungkook stared at him. Stop what? Jimin's eyes filled with tears. They said they would hurt you again. The room became silent. Jungkook looked toward Taehyung. Taehyung had tears running down his face, but his expression had changed. Completely. He wasn't angry anymore. He looked devastated. You really thought I would hurt him? He asked. Jimin whispered, I didn't know what to believe. You could have asked me. I was afraid. You could have asked Jungkook. I was afraid. Completely. Jimin suddenly shouted. His voice echoed through the room. He immediately covered his mouth. Jungkook stared at him. Jimin looked broken. I was afraid that if I told you everything, they would do something worse. Suga took a slow breath. Completely. Everyone out arm looked at him. What? Except Jungkook, Jimin, and Taehyung. Jin frowned. Are you sure? Yes. The others hesitated before leaving. Suga remained behind. Jahope looked at him. Youngie. Suga didn't move. Go. Completely. When the door finally closed, Suga looked at Jimin. Now tell us the whole story. Jimin upped his face. I received the first message 3 days ago. Jungkook stared at him. 3 days? Yes. Why didn't you tell me? Completely. Because the message said they were watching you. Who? I don't know. What did it say? Jimin closed his eyes. It said if you care about Jungkook, keep him away from Taehyung. Taehyung's face changed. That's why you started avoiding me. Completely. Jimin nodded. Then yesterday, another message came. What did it say? Jimin looked at Jungkook. Tomorrow, Jungkook will fall. Jungkook felt cold, despite the warmth in the room. And you still said nothing? I wanted to tell you. Completely. But you didn't. I couldn't. Why? Jimin looked at Taehyung. Because they sent me a picture of you. Taehyung frowned. A picture of me? You were standing beside Jungkook. Jimin's voice shook. They said if I warned you. Completely. The picture would be used to make it look like you planned everything. Taehyung slowly shook his head. So they wanted you to blame me. Yes. And you did. Jimin lowered his head. Yes. Jungkook closed his eyes. He was angry. Completely. But beneath the anger was something worse. Disappointment. He trusted Jimin. Maybe more than anyone, and Jimin had looked him in the eyes and lied. Jimin, Jungkook said quietly. Jimin looked up. If you had told me the truth before the performance, completely, maybe none of this would have happened. Jimin's tears fell again. I know. If you had told the others, we could have protected you. I know. Then why? Jimin's voice dropped to almost nothing. Completely. Because they knew something about you that I promised never to reveal. Jungkook frowned. What did I tell you? Jimin shook his head. Not you. Someone from your past told me. Jungkook stared at him. Who? Jimin hesitated. Suga noticed immediately. Completely. Jimin finally whispered. Your older brother. Jungkook's eyes widened. My brother? He contacted me months ago. Why? Because he was worried about you. About what? Jimin looked toward the door. Completely. He said someone had been looking into your past. Suga stepped closer. And you kept that from Jungkook too? Jimin nodded. Why? Because your brother asked me to. Jungkook shook his head. He had no right. Completely. He said telling you would make you investigate. Of course I would investigate. That's why he was scared. Jungkook stared at Jimin. Scared of what? Jimin took a breath. Completely. He said there was a person from your past who believed you owed him something. Jungkook's face tightened. Owed him what? I don't know. You keep saying you don't know, because I really don't. Suddenly, Suga's phone rang. He looked at the screen. Completely. It was the production manager. Suga answered. Yes, his expression changed almost immediately. Say that again. Jungkook watched him carefully. You're sure? Suga stood completely still. Nobody touches that equipment. Nobody deletes anything. Completely. Do you understand? He ended the call. Jungkook asked, what happened? Suga looked at him. The safety system wasn't turned off. Jungkook frowned. Then what? It was overridden manually. Taehyung looked at Jimin. Jimin looked terrified. Completely. Suga continued, and there was only one authorized access card used to override it. Jungkook whispered, whose? Suga didn't answer immediately. Then he said, Jimin's. Jimin's face went completely white. No. Taehyung stepped backward. Completely. Jimin, I didn't do it. Jungkook stared at him. Your card? I lost it 2 days ago. Suga's eyes narrowed. You never reported it, because I thought I left it somewhere. Where? Jimin couldn't answer. Jungkook looked at him. Jimin. Completely. I don't know. The room suddenly felt smaller. Taehyung looked toward the door. Someone stole your card. Suga nodded slowly. Or Jimin gave it to them. Jimin shook his head violently. I would never do that. Jungkook stared at him. Then prove it. Completely. Jimin looked at Jungkook, desperate. How? Jungkook's voice was cold. Tell me where you were 30 minutes before I fell. Jimin froze. And when he finally answered, even Suga looked shocked. Jimin's lips parted, but no words came out. Jungkook kept staring at him, waiting. Where were you 30 minutes before I fell? He asked again. Jimin looked at Suga, then Taehyung, and finally back at Jungkook. In the service hallway. Completely. Suga's expression changed. Why? I was looking for someone. Who? I don't know his name. Taehyung immediately stepped closer. You were meeting someone? Jimin shook his head. No, I was trying to find him. Why? Completely. Because he left something in my room. Jungkook frowned. What did he leave? Jimin closed his eyes. A note. What note? It said I had to choose. Jungkook's voice became quieter. Choose what? Jimin looked at him with tears in his eyes. Completely. You or the truth. Nobody spoke. The sentence made no sense, and yet Jimin looked like he had been carrying it alone for days. Suga crossed his arms. What happened after you found the note? I went to the service hallway, and nobody was there. Completely. Then why did you stay? Jimin hesitated. I heard voices. Jungkook's, I couldn't tell. Male or female? Male. How many? 2. Suga immediately asked, what did they say? Jimin looked down. They were talking about Jungkook. Completely. Jungkook's jaw tightened. What did they say? One of them said the plan had changed. What plan? I don't know. Then what did you hear? Jimin took a shaky breath. They said Taehyung had to be blamed. Taehyung froze. They said my name? Completely. Jimin nodded yes. Why? Because you were the easiest person to frame. Taehyung looked away, hurt flashing across his face. And you believed them? No. Then why did you accuse me? Jimin's voice cracked. Because they told me that if I didn't, completely, Jungkook would be next. Jungkook stared at him. Next? Jimin nodded. They said they had already tested the first warning. Suga's eyes narrowed. The stage accident was a test? Jimin didn't answer. That silence was enough. Completely. Jungkook felt his hands tighten around the blanket. So my injury was planned? I don't know. Jimin, I don't know if they planned the entire thing. But you think they did. Jimin nodded slowly. Suga moved toward the window and looked outside. Completely. There's another problem. Jungkook looked at him. What? Your hospital room was assigned 30 minutes before you arrived. So, the person who delivered the envelope knew exactly which room you would be in. Taehyung's face hardened. Completely. That means someone inside the hospital gave them the information. Suga nodded. Or someone from our team. Jungkook looked at Jimin. Did you tell anyone I was coming here? Only the members. Who else? The manager? Anyone from staff? Completely. Jimin shook his head. No. Then someone was already watching. Suga's phone buzzed again. He looked at it. This time he didn't answer. Jungkook noticed. Who is it? Suga showed him the screen. It was an unknown number. Completely. The message contained a single photograph. Suga opened it. His expression immediately went cold. Jungkook asked, what? Suga handed him the phone. The photograph showed the service hallway from the night of the accident. Jimin was visible near a door. Lee. Behind him stood a man wearing a black jacket and a cap. His face was partially hidden, but what mattered was what the man was holding. Jimin's missing access card. Jungkook stared at the image. That's the person you saw. Jimin nodded. Yes, Lee. Can you recognize him? Not his face. Then, how do you know it's the same person? Jimin pointed at the photograph. The watch. Everyone looked. The man wore a distinctive silver watch. Jimin whispered, Lee. I saw that watch that night. Suga suddenly looked at Taehyung. Taehyung looked confused. What? Suga asked, where were you before the performance? Backstage. Who was with you? Taehyung thought for a moment. J-Hope. After that? Lee. I went to the side stage. Alone? Taehyung nodded. Yes. Suga stared at him. Did anyone approach you? Taehyung hesitated. One person. Jungkook asked, who, a staff member? What did he want? He told me to move to a different position. Lee. Suga's eyes narrowed. Who? Taehyung shook his head. I don't know his name. Jimin suddenly whispered, did he wear a silver watch? Taehyung looked at him. His face changed. Yes. The room fell silent. Jimin's eyes widened. That's him. Lee. Jungkook looked between them. So the man with the watch was moving Taehyung into position. Suga nodded, and he had Jimin's access card. Taehyung slowly shook his head. But why? Nobody knew. Then Jungkook remembered something else. Wait! Lee. Everyone looked at him. Before I fell, Taehyung wasn't behind me. Taehyung stared at him. What? Jungkook closed his eyes, trying to reconstruct the moment. You were supposed to be on my left. Taehyung nodded. Yes. But you were moved. Yes. Lee. Jungkook opened his eyes. Someone changed your position. Taehyung whispered, so I would be close enough to grab you. Jimin looked at Jungkook. That's what I was trying to tell you. Jungkook's anger softened for the first time. Lee. But then another thought hit him. If Taehyung was moved into position to save me. He looked at Jimin. Why did you think he was the one who pushed me? Jimin looked devastated. Because when I saw you fall, I saw Taehyung's hand on you. Lee. But you didn't see what happened before. No, you assumed. Yes, and then you lied. Jimin lowered his head. Yes. Jungkook looked away. The pain in his ribs suddenly felt easier to handle than the pain in his chest. Lee. You could have gotten Taehyung blamed for something he didn't do. I know. You could have destroyed his life. I know. Why should I trust you now? Jimin's eyes filled with tears. You shouldn't. That answer surprised Jungkook. Jimin continued. Lee. Not yet. He stepped closer to the bed. But I need you to know one thing. I never wanted Taehyung hurt. I never wanted you hurt. I made a terrible decision because I thought I could control the situation. Taehyung looked at him. You couldn't. Lee. I know. Suga suddenly stood up. Enough. Everyone looked at him. He held up his phone. I just got the security footage. Jungkook asked. From the stage? Yes. What does it show? Suga looked directly at Jimin. Lee. It shows someone entering the control room using Jimin's access card. Jimin's face went pale. Who? Suga turned the phone around. The footage was blurry, but the figure was visible. Jungkook stared at the screen. Taehyung stepped closer. Lee. Jimin stopped breathing. Because the person on the footage wasn't a stranger. It was someone they had trusted enough to let walk freely backstage. And before Suga could say the name, the hospital lights suddenly went out. The hospital lights went out without warning. For 1 second, nobody moved. The room was completely dark except for the faint glow from Suga's phone. Jungkook heard Jimin inhale sharply. Taehyung immediately stepped toward the bed. Jungkook? Lee. I'm here, Jungkook answered. His voice was steady, but his heart was racing. Then somewhere in the hallway, a door slammed. Jin's voice could be heard from outside. What happened? A nurse shouted something nobody could understand. Lee. Emergency lights flickered on, bathing the room in a dim red glow. Suga was still holding the phone. Nobody moved. His voice was unusually serious. Taehyung looked toward the hallway. The security footage. Suga nodded. It disappeared. Lee. Jungkook frowned. What the file was loading, then the system went offline. RM rushed into the room. Are you all okay? Suga looked at him. Where were you? RM stopped. What? When the lights went out. RM looked confused. Lee. I was at the nurse's station. Suga studied him for a moment before nodding. Fine. Jin entered behind him. The backup generator should have activated immediately. J-Hope followed. Security is checking the floor. Jungkook looked at all of them. Lee. What happened to the footage? Suga held up his phone. Someone cut the connection before we could see the face. Jimin suddenly spoke. Everyone turned toward him. Taehyung stared at him. How? Jimin shook his head. Completely. Because the moment Suga opened the file, the lights went out. Suga looked at him. Exactly. Jungkook looked toward the door. Then whoever did this is nearby. The words made everyone go silent. Jin immediately closed the door. RM locked it. Completely. J-Hope moved a chair in front of it. Nobody comes in unless we know who it is, he said. Suga looked at Jungkook, and nobody leaves alone. Jungkook nodded. Then he noticed Jimin standing apart from everyone. His hands were trembling. Jimin. Completely. Jimin looked at him. What? What aren't you telling us? Jimin shook his head. Nothing. You said that before. I know. And every time you said it, there was something else. Jimin looked down. Taehyung quietly said, tell him. Completely. Jimin looked at Taehyung. You really want me to? Yes. Jimin took a breath. The person in that footage. He stopped. I think I know who it is. Suga's eyes narrowed. Who? Jimin looked toward the door. Completely. Someone who has been around us for months. RM asked. Staff? Jimin nodded. Yes, name. Jimin hesitated. I can't. Taehyung stepped forward. Why not? Because if I'm wrong, I'll destroy another person's life. Jungkook looked at him. Completely. And if you're right? Jimin's eyes filled with fear. Then we have a much bigger problem. Suga moved closer. Jimin, this is the moment where you stop protecting everyone except yourself. Jimin looked at him. I'm not protecting myself. Completely. Jimin swallowed. The person I suspect has access to almost everything. Schedules, dressing rooms, stage plans, security information, medical arrangements. RM's expression changed. Medical arrangements? Jimin nodded. Completely. That means they knew Jungkook would be brought here. Jin whispered, and they knew which room. J-Hope looked toward the hallway, so the person who caused the accident could also have known exactly where Jungkook would end up. Completely. Jungkook stared at Jimin. You knew this before tonight, I suspected, and you still blame Taehyung. Jimin closed his eyes. I was trying to buy time. Taehyung's voice became bitter. By making me the villain. Jimin looked at him. I'm sorry. Completely. That doesn't fix it. I know. You made Jungkook doubt me. I know. You made everyone look at me like I was dangerous. Jimin's voice broke. I know. Taehyung looked away. Jungkook watched them silently. He could feel the tension between them. Completely. But there was something else now. Something deeper. Jimin wasn't only afraid of the person behind the accident, he was afraid of what would happen if that person was exposed. Suga suddenly spoke. Completely. Everyone needs to understand the rules from this moment. RM nodded. Suga continued. Nobody meets staff alone. Nobody goes backstage without another member. Nobody answers unknown numbers. Nobody gives anyone information about Jungkook's condition. Completely. And most importantly, nobody trusts a message just because it contains information only we should know. Jin frowned. Why? Suga looked at him. Because whoever is doing this already has access to information we thought was private. Completely. Jungkook looked at his phone. The previous message was still there. You remember wrong. He stared at it. They want me confused. Suga nodded. Exactly. Jimin whispered, they want all of us fighting. Taehyung looked at him. And it worked. Completely. Jimin flinched. Jungkook looked between them. Then we stop fighting. Taehyung looked at Jungkook. Can you trust me? Jungkook didn't answer immediately. He remembered Taehyung's hand grabbing him on stage. He remembered Jimin's accusation. Completely. He remembered waking up in the hospital and seeing both of them standing on opposite sides of the room. Finally, Jungkook said, I trust what I saw. Taehyung nodded slowly. And what did you see? Jungkook looked at him. You tried to save me. Completely. Taehyung's eyes filled with tears. Jimin lowered his head, but before the moment could settle, the door handle suddenly moved. Everyone froze. Someone was trying to enter. RM stepped closer. Who is it? No answer. The handle moved again. Completely. Suga raised his phone, ready to record. Jin whispered, Security? J-Hope shook his head. They would announce themselves. Jungkook stared at the door. Then a voice came from the other side. It's me. Everyone recognized it. Completely. Jimin's face immediately went pale. Taehyung whispered no. Suga looked at him. Who? Taehyung didn't answer. Jungkook stared at Jimin. You know that voice. Jimin slowly nodded. The voice came again. Open the door. We need to talk. Completely. Jimin whispered one sentence. That's the person who warned me. Suga's expression changed instantly. He stepped toward the door. Nobody opens it. The voice outside became colder. Jimin, you have 30 seconds. Jimin froze. Completely. 30 seconds for what? To decide whether you want Jungkook to know what really happened that night. Jungkook's eyes narrowed. Open the door, he said. Suga turned toward him. Are you sure? Jungkook nodded. Yes. Jimin grabbed his arm. Completely. Don't. Jungkook looked at him. Why? Jimin's voice shook. Because if that door opens, there is no going back. The handle moved again. The voice outside whispered something that made Jimin completely lose the color in his face. Jimin, completely, tell Jungkook who was standing beside you when you lost your access card. Jungkook stared at Jimin. Who was standing beside you? Jimin said nothing. Suga stepped closer. Jimin. Jimin's lips trembled. I can't. Jungkook's voice became colder. Completely. You can. No, you have to. Jimin shook his head, because it was someone from our own team. The room fell silent. Taehyung looked at Jimin. Who? Jimin finally lifted his eyes, but before he could say the name, completely, the door suddenly opened by itself, and the person standing outside was holding something Jungkook recognized immediately from the night of the accident. The door opened only a few inches, but it was enough to make everyone in the room freeze. Nobody had touched the handle. Nobody had given permission for anyone to enter. Yet there it was, slowly moving inward. A figure stood in the hallway, completely, mostly hidden by the darkness. In his hand was a small black access card. Jimin immediately stepped backward. Jungkook recognized it before anyone said a word. That's mine, Jimin whispered. The person outside raised the card slightly. Completely. You've been looking for this. Suga moved in front of Jungkook. Stay where you are. The figure didn't move. I'm not here to hurt him. Taehyung answered coldly. Then why are you holding his card? There was a short silence. Completely. Because I needed him to understand. RM stepped forward. Understand what? The figure finally entered the emergency light. It was one of the production coordinators who had been working with them for months. Everyone recognized him. Completely. He had been around rehearsals, backstage areas, transportation, and technical meetings. He was the kind of person nobody usually noticed because he was always supposed to be there. Jimin stared at him. You? The man looked at Jimin. Yes. Completely. Jungkook looked at him carefully. Were you the one in the footage? The man smiled faintly. Which footage? Suga stepped forward. Don't play games. The man looked at Suga. You always were the suspicious one. Answer the question, yes. Completely. Taehyung's jaw tightened. So you entered the control room using Jimin's card. I did. Jimin looked horrified. Why? Because you gave me access. I never gave you anything. The man held up the card. You lost it. You stole it. Completely. There's a difference? Jimin's eyes hardened. You used it to override the safety system. Correct. Jungkook stared at him. Why? The man looked directly at Jungkook. Because you were supposed to fall. Taehyung stepped forward. You planned it. Completely. I arranged the conditions. That's the same thing. The man shrugged. Call it whatever you want. RM's voice became firm. Why would you do this? The man looked at Jimin. Ask him. Jimin shook his head. Don't. Jungkook looked at Jimin. Completely. What does he mean? The man smiled. Jimin knows why. No, I don't. You know enough. Suga stepped closer. You sent him the messages. The man nodded. Yes, you threatened him. Yes, you told him to blame Taehyung. Yes. Completely. Taehyung looked at Jimin. His expression was filled with hurt. And you followed his instructions. Jimin whispered, I was trying to protect Jungkook. The man laughed quietly. You always use that excuse. Jungkook's eyes narrowed. Completely. What does that mean? The man turned toward him. You really don't remember. Remember what? The promise. Jungkook stared at him. What promise? The man stepped closer. Suga immediately blocked him. Stay there. The man stopped. Fine. Completely. Then he looked at Jungkook. Years ago, before you were famous, there was an agreement. Jungkook shook his head. I never made an agreement with you. Not with me. The man glanced at Jimin. With someone else. Jimin's face went pale. Completely. Jungkook noticed immediately. Jimin looked away. Tell me. I can't. Tell me now. Jimin shook his head. Not here. You said that before. Because it's dangerous. Everything is dangerous now. Jungkook's voice became sharper. Completely. I got hurt because you kept secrets. Taehyung got blamed because you kept secrets. Suga nearly collapsed because of what you said. How much worse does it have to get before you tell me the truth? Jimin stared at him, tears running down his face. Completely. The coordinator watched silently. He's right, the man said. Jimin turned toward him. Shut up. The man smiled. You should tell him. You have no right. I have every right. Taehyung stepped between them. You don't control him anymore. Completely. The man looked at Taehyung. You think you saved Jungkook tonight? Taehyung's expression hardened. I did. You only delayed what was coming. What does that mean? It means the accident was never the objective. Everyone froze. Completely. Jungkook looked at him. Then what was? The man answered calmly. Separating the 7 of you. RM frowned. Why? Because 7 people protecting each other are difficult to control. Jin stepped forward. And 6? Much easier. Lee. J-Hope looked disturbed. You wanted us to turn against each other. Exactly. Suga stared at him. And JIMIN was your first target. The man nodded. Because he would sacrifice himself before he let JUNGKOOK get hurt. JIMIN closed his eyes. Lee. JUNGKOOK looked at him. Is that why? JIMIN didn't respond. You knew he would obey you. The man corrected him. I knew JIMIN would do anything to protect what he considers important. JUNGKOOK's expression changed. What exactly did you threaten? Lee. The man looked at JIMIN. Tell him. JIMIN shook his head. No, tell him. No, then I will. JIMIN suddenly moved toward him. Don't. The man smiled. There it is. Suga grabbed JIMIN's shoulder. Calm down. JIMIN was shaking violently. Lee. He can't tell him. JUNGKOOK looked at JIMIN. Why? Because you'll what to believe. I already don't know what to believe. JIMIN wiped his face. I was given a choice. What choice? If I protected you, they would destroy something important to you. Lee. JUNGKOOK's voice dropped. What? Everyone went silent. JUNGKOOK stared at him. How? They had private information. About me, about all of us. And you believed them. Lee. They showed me enough to make me believe they could do it. TAEHYUNG whispered. So you chose to protect JUNGKOOK by destroying our trust? JIMIN looked down. Yes. JUNGKOOK closed his eyes. He understood the fear now. Lee. But understanding didn't erase the damage. And you thought blaming TAEHYUNG would keep them satisfied. JIMIN nodded. They told me if TAEHYUNG became the person everyone suspected, the investigation would stop. TAEHYUNG shook his head. Lee. You were willing to sacrifice me. I'm sorry. That isn't enough. I know. Suga suddenly noticed something in the coordinator's hand. What else are you holding? The man looked down at the object. It was a small USB drive. This, Lee. JUNGKOOK stared at it. What's on it? The man smiled. The recording. JIMIN immediately stepped forward. No. JUNGKOOK looked at him. The recording you were threatened with. JIMIN nodded. Yes, then let me see it. JUNGKOOK, don't. Lee. Give it to me. The coordinator raised the USB drive. There's one condition. Suga stepped forward. We don't negotiate with you. The man ignored him. JIMIN has to tell JUNGKOOK what happened the night he lost his access card. Lee. JIMIN's breathing became heavier. JUNGKOOK looked at him. What happened? JIMIN closed his eyes. I gave it to someone. TAEHYUNG stared at him. You said you lost it. I lied. Suga's expression hardened. Who did you give it to? Lee. JIMIN opened his eyes. I gave it to the person who promised they could protect JUNGKOOK. JUNGKOOK's face changed. Who? JIMIN looked toward the coordinator. Not him. Everyone froze. Then who? JIMIN whispered a name. The reaction was immediate. Lee. TAEHYUNG stepped backward. RM stopped breathing for a moment. Jin looked toward the door. Jay, that's impossible. Suga's face went completely blank. JUNGKOOK stared at JIMIN. You're lying. JIMIN shook his head. I wish I was. Lee. And then the coordinator slowly turned the USB drive in his hand and said, Now you understand why the accident was only the beginning. Lee. For several seconds after JIMIN said the name, nobody in the hospital room moved. JUNGKOOK stared at him as if he had heard something impossible. TAEHYUNG looked toward RM. Jin's mouth was slightly open. J-Hope lowered his eyes. Lee, trying to process what he had just heard, Suga was the only one who remained completely still. Say it again, JUNGKOOK said. JIMIN shook his head. I can't. You already said it. JUNGKOOK, say it again. JIMIN's eyes filled with tears. Lee. I gave the card to our former security coordinator. TAEHYUNG immediately frowned. He left months ago, I know. He doesn't work with us anymore. I know. RM finally spoke. Then how did he get backstage? JIMIN looked down. Lee. Because someone gave him access. Suga's eyes narrowed. Who? JIMIN looked at the coordinator standing near the door. The man simply smiled. Now we're getting somewhere. JUNGKOOK looked at him. You worked with him. I facilitated communication. Lee. You brought him back? I didn't bring anyone back. Then how did he get my security information? The man didn't answer. JUNGKOOK's expression hardened. How did he know about the stage? Still no answer. Suga stepped forward. Lee. You're not leaving this room. The coordinator laughed quietly. You think I came here without a plan? Suga stopped. What plan? The same plan that has worked for weeks. JIMIN whispered, Stop. The man looked at him. You should be thanking me. Lee. For what? For giving you a chance to protect him. JIMIN shook his head. You destroyed everything. No, you did that yourself. JUNGKOOK looked between them. What happened between you two? JIMIN's face became tense. Lee. The coordinator answered before Jimin could. He came to me because he was desperate. Jimin? Jungkook asked. Jimin nodded slowly. Yes, why? Jimin swallowed. Because Jungkook was receiving threats. Jungkook stared at him. What threats? Lee. Anonymous messages. How long? Almost a month. And you never told me. I thought they would stop. They didn't. No, so you went to him. Jimin nodded. I thought he could help. The coordinator smiled. I offered protection. Lee. Taehyung stepped forward. And what did you demand in return? The man looked at him. Nothing at first. At first! Taehyung repeated. Then what changed? The threats became more serious, Jimin answered quietly. Lee. They started mentioning the members. RM looked at him. All of us, yes. What did they want? They wanted access. Jin frowned. Access to what? Jimin looked toward Jungkook, to him. Jungkook's face tightened. Why me? Jimin shook his head. Lee. I don't know. Suga interrupted. You do know something. Jimin looked at him. I know they were looking for something from Jungkook's past. Jungkook slowly sat straighter despite the pain. What? Jimin hesitated. A person. Who? Lee. Someone you knew before the company. Jungkook searched his memory. I don't know who you're talking about. Maybe you don't remember. Then why would they care? Jimin's eyes moved toward the USB drive. Lee. Because that recording may prove that you do. Jungkook stared at the drive. Play it. The coordinator shook his head. Not yet. You came here to show it to me. I came here to make sure you understood the rules. What rules? Lee. You stop asking questions. Suga laughed once without humor. You think you can walk into a hospital room and threaten us? The man looked at him. I think you already know I can. Suga's face hardened. Try. The room became tense again. Lee. RM stepped between them. Nobody does anything stupid, the coordinator smiled. That's exactly what I expected from you. RM stared at him. What does that mean? You always try to keep the team together, and that makes you predictable. Lee. Jin's voice became cold. Enough. The coordinator turned toward him. You protect everyone with jokes until the pressure becomes too much. Jin stopped smiling. You don't know me. I know more than you think. J-Hope stepped forward. Lee. Stop talking about us like you own us. The coordinator's expression changed. I don't own anyone. He looked toward Jungkook. I only know what each person is willing to sacrifice. Jungkook stared at him. Lee. Then tell me what I'm willing to sacrifice. The man smiled. Everything. Jungkook didn't blink. Wrong, why? Because I'm not sacrificing them for myself. Taehyung looked at Jungkook. Jimin lowered his head. The coordinator's smile disappeared. Lee. That's why you're dangerous. Jungkook asked. Dangerous to whom? To anyone trying to separate you. Suga suddenly realized something. This isn't about Jungkook alone. Everyone looked at him. What do you mean? RM asked. Lee. Suga pointed toward the coordinator. He keeps talking about separation. He doesn't want Jungkook dead. He wants us divided. The coordinator said nothing. Suga continued. The accident was designed to create suspicion. Jimin received threats. Lee. Taehyung was positioned close to Jungkook. Jimin saw Taehyung's hand and blamed him. Then someone sent the photograph, then the hospital message. Every step was designed to make us distrust one another. Taehyung looked at Jimin. Lee. And it almost worked. Jimin nodded. I know. Suga's eyes narrowed. But there's one thing I still don't understand. He looked at the coordinator. Why would you need Jimin? The man remained silent. If you had access to the stage system... Lee. Why involve him? No answer. If you had access to security, why use his card? Still nothing. Because you needed a witness, Suga said. The coordinator's expression changed slightly. Suga saw it. Lee. You needed someone inside the group who could later be blamed. Jimin looked up. That's why he chose me. Exactly, Suga replied. The coordinator smiled again. Very good. Jungkook's face hardened. So Jimin was never your partner? No. Lee. He was your scapegoat? Correct. Jimin closed his eyes. I should have known. Taehyung looked at him. You were scared. That doesn't excuse it. No. Taehyung's voice softened. But it explains it. Jimin looked at him, surprised. Lee. You still hate me? Taehyung asked. Jimin shook his head. I hate what I did. Taehyung looked away. Then we can deal with that later. Jungkook watched them. For the first time since the accident, Lee. The team seemed to be moving in the same direction again. But the coordinator suddenly raised the USB drive. You're forgetting one thing. Jungkook looked at him. What? The recording. Jimin immediately said, don't play it. Lee. Jungkook looked at him. Why? Because you're not ready. I decide that. No. Jimin's voice became desperate. Jungkook, please. What is on it? Jimin shook his head. Something you said. Jungkook frowned. When? Before we debuted. Leetly. What did I say? You told someone you were afraid of losing your family. Jungkook's expression changed. That isn't a secret. You also said something else. What? Jimin looked at him. You said if you ever became successful, Leetly, you would make sure nobody from that time could use your past against you. Jungkook stared at him. I don't remember saying that. That's the problem. The coordinator stepped forward. You don't remember. Jungkook looked at him. Then remind me. Leetly. The man shook his head. Not until you answer one question. What question? Who do you trust? Jungkook looked around the room. RM Jin, Suga, J-Hope, Taehyung, Jimin. 7 people who had spent years together, shared stages, difficult nights. Leetly. Victories, failures, and countless moments nobody outside their circle could understand. Jungkook looked at each of them. Then his eyes stopped on Jimin. Jimin looked devastated. Don't choose me, Jimin whispered. Jungkook frowned. Why? Leetly. Because I already betrayed you. Jungkook stared at him. You made a mistake. I lied to you. Yes, I accused Taehyung. Yes, I gave away my access card. Yes, Jimin's tears fell. Then how can you still look at me like that? Leetly. Jungkook took a slow breath. Because I know you. Jimin shook his head. You don't know everything. Then tell me. I'm afraid. Of me. Of what happens after you know. Jungkook reached toward him. Come here. Leetly. Jimin hesitated before stepping closer. Jungkook grabbed his wrist gently. You don't have to protect me by yourself. Jimin started crying. Taehyung looked away, giving them a moment. Suga watched the coordinator instead. The man was strangely calm. Leetly, too calm. You expected this, Suga said. The coordinator smiled. Of course. Why? Because trust is always stronger after betrayal. Suga frowned. What are you talking about? You think the conflict is over because Jimin admitted the truth. Leetly. The man looked at Jungkook. It isn't. Jungkook slowly turned toward him. What else? The coordinator raised the USB drive. This is only the first recording. Everyone went silent. There are more? RM asked. 7. Jin's face changed. Leetly. 1 for each member. What do they contain? Things each of them thought nobody else knew. J-Hope whispered, you're lying. Maybe. The coordinator smiled, but you won't know until you hear them. Suga stepped forward. Give me the drive. No. Leetly. Then leave. I will. He turned toward the door. Jungkook immediately said, wait. The man stopped. You want the recording? Yes, then come with me. Jimin grabbed Jungkook's arm. No. Why? Because that's exactly what he wants. I know. Leetly. Then don't go. Jungkook looked at him. I'm not going anywhere alone. He looked at the others. We go together. RM nodded. Together. Jin stepped forward. Nobody separates. J-Hope nodded. Taehyung stood beside Jungkook. Leetly. Suga moved toward the door. Then let's see what he has. The coordinator opened the door and stepped into the hallway, but before leaving, he looked back at Jimin. You still haven't told Jungkook the worst part. Jimin froze. Leetly. Jungkook turned toward him. What worst part? The man smiled. Ask him why he was standing beside the control room when the safety system was overridden. Then he walked away. Jungkook stared at Jimin. You were there? Jimin couldn't answer. Leetly. Suga closed his eyes briefly. Jimin finally whispered, yes. Jungkook's expression changed. You were there when the system was overridden. Yes, and you watched it happen. No. Then what were you doing? Leetly. Jimin looked at him with tears in his eyes. I was trying to stop it. Jungkook stared at him. Then why didn't you tell me? Jimin's voice broke. Because I failed. Nobody spoke. Then from the hallway, Leetly. The coordinator's voice came back one last time. And if you want to know why he failed, ask Jimin, who opened the control room door for him. Jimin's face went completely white. Jungkook slowly turned toward him. Who opened the door? Jimin whispered. Leetly. I did. The room went silent again, and this time even Taehyung didn't know whether Jimin had been protecting Jungkook all along, or whether he had unknowingly helped the person who wanted to destroy them. I opened the door. Jimin's words remained hanging in the hospital room, and for a few seconds Jungkook simply stared at him. He didn't look angry anymore. That was what frightened Jimin most. Jungkook's face had become completely still. Leetly. You opened the control room door, Jungkook repeated. Jimin nodded. Yes, for him, I didn't know who he was working for, but you knew someone was inside, yes, and you let them in. Jimin closed his eyes. Yes, Taehyung stepped closer. Leetly. Jimin, why? Jimin looked at him. Because I thought I was stopping the accident. You thought opening the door would stop it? I thought someone inside could shut down the system before anything happened. Suga immediately interrupted. Lee. Who told you that? Jimin hesitated. The person who contacted me, the same person who threatened you. Yes, so you trusted an anonymous person enough to give them access to the control room. I didn't know what else to do. Lee. Suga shook his head. That is exactly what they wanted you to think. JUNGKOok slowly looked toward the closed hospital door. Then the man outside was telling the truth about one thing. Jimin lowered his head. Yes, you helped them. Lee. Jimin's eyes filled with tears. I didn't know. But you did, I know. JUNGKOok looked down at his injured hand. His fingers trembled slightly. Do you understand what happened because of that? Yes. TAEHYUNG almost got blamed. Jimin nodded. Lee. Yes, I ended up in this hospital, yes, and you nearly destroyed the trust between all of us. Jimin's voice broke. I know. JUNGKOok looked at him for a long moment. Then tell me everything. Jimin looked terrified. Everything? Lee. No more half-truths. Jimin's nodded slowly. Okay, he took a breath. The first message came 28 days ago. RM, who had been standing near the window, immediately turned around. 28? Yes. Jimin continued. Lee. It said someone was watching JUNGKOok. At first, I thought it was just a threat. I ignored it. Jin asked, then what happened? 2 days later, I received another message. It contained a photograph of JUNGKOok leaving the building. Lee. J-Hope's expression changed. They were following him. Yes, did you tell security? No. Suga shook his head. Why? Because the next message said if I told anyone, they would release information about JUNGKOok's past. JUNGKOok frowned. Lee. What information? I still don't know. You keep saying that because they never showed me everything. But they showed you enough. Yes. Jimin's voice became quieter. They sent me a recording. JUNGKOok looked up. My voice? Yes. Lee. Saying what? Jimin swallowed. You were talking to someone before we debuted. Who? I don't know. What were you talking about? You were angry. JUNGKOok frowned. I was angry. Very. About what? Jimin looked at him. Lee. Someone had betrayed you. JUNGKOok became silent. Something about that sentence triggered a faint memory. A room. A younger version of himself. A voice. Someone telling him that people only stayed when they needed something. Lee. JUNGKOok rubbed his forehead. I don't remember. Jimin nodded. That's what scared me. Why? Because they said the recording proved you had a reason to hate someone. TAEHYUNG asked, who? Jimin shook his head. They never said. Lee. Suga stepped forward. Then what did they want from JUNGKOok? They wanted him to remember. Remember what? A promise. JUNGKOok looked at him. What promise? Jimin hesitated. That he would never reveal what happened that night. Lee. The room became silent. JUNGKOok stared at him. What night? Jimin whispered. The night before you entered the company. JUNGKOok closed his eyes. A sharp headache moved through his head. He suddenly saw a dark street. A car parked near a building. Lee. A younger version of himself standing beside someone. He heard a voice say, if you tell anyone, everything ends. JUNGKOok opened his eyes suddenly. I remember something. Everyone turned toward him. What? RM asked. JUNGKOok breathed heavily. Lee. There was a person. Jimin stepped closer. Who? JUNGKOok shook his head. I don't know. What did they look like? I can't remember. What did they say? JUNGKOok closed his eyes again. They told me to keep quiet. Suga looked at Jimin. Lee. That's what they're using. Jimin nodded. Yes. TAEHYUNG asked, but why now? Jimin looked toward him. Because someone found the recording. Who? I don't know. Then why are they targeting JUNGKOok? Jimin answered quietly. Lee. Because the recording isn't just about him. Everyone stared at him. What does that mean? Jimin's hands started shaking. There are 7 voices in the recording. RM's eyes widened. 7? Yes. Jin stepped closer. Our voices? I don't know. Lee. You said you heard JUNGKOok. I heard him clearly. What about the others? Jimin shook his head. The recording was edited. Suga immediately understood. Someone took pieces of different recordings and put them together. Yes. Lee. To make it look like something happened that never did. Yes. TAEHYUNG looked at Jimin. Then why did you believe it? Jimin's eyes filled with tears. Because I heard JUNGKOok say my name. JUNGKOok froze. My voice said your name? Jimin nodded. Lee. Yes. What did it say? Jimin looked down. It said you wanted me gone. Silence. JUNGKOok stared at him. I never said that. I know that now. Then why did you believe it? Jimin wiped his tears. Because it sounded real. Suga shook his head. Lee. That's the whole point. They wanted Jimin to think JUNGKOok had turned against him, while making JUNGKOok think TAEHYUNG had betrayed him. TAEHYUNG whispered they were attacking every relationship at the same time. RM nodded. Exactly. Completely. J-Hope looked toward the door. Then the person who entered the control room wasn't working alone. Suga turned toward him. Why? Because someone had to manipulate the messages, someone had to access the security system. Completely. Someone had to monitor the hospital, and someone had to arrange the stage. Jin nodded slowly. There must be a group. Jungkook looked at Jimin. How many people contacted you? 3 numbers. Suga immediately asked, different numbers? Yes. Completely. But did they write differently? Jimin thought for a moment. No. Suga's eyes narrowed. Same writing style? Yes. Then one person was using different numbers. Jimin nodded. That's what I think. Suddenly Jungkook's phone buzzed again. Completely. Everyone turned toward it. Another message appeared. This time there were only 4 words. You trusted the wrong person. Jungkook stared at the screen. Jimin immediately whispered, they know we figured it out. Suga stepped closer. Don't answer. Completely. He typed one sentence. Who are you? The message showed as read almost immediately. Everyone waited. A reply appeared. Ask Jimin. Jimin shook his head. No. Jungkook looked at him. They keep telling me to ask you. Completely. Another message appeared. Ask him about the night he saved you. Jimin's face changed. Jungkook stared at him. You saved me? Jimin didn't answer. Jimin, I tried. What happened? Jimin looked at him and the tears came before the words. Completely. The night before your accident, I found someone inside your room. Jungkook's eyes widened. What? I caught them searching through your things. Taehyung asked, who? I couldn't see their face. Then what did you do? I stopped them. And? Completely. They ran. Suga asked, did you report it? Jimin shook his head. No, Suga's expression hardened. Why? Because they left something behind. Jungkook whispered, what? Completely. Jimin reached into his pocket and slowly pulled out a small folded piece of paper. He had been carrying it the entire time. Jungkook stared at it. Why didn't you show us this? Jimin whispered, because I was afraid of what was written on it. Completely. Jungkook held out his hand. Jimin hesitated before placing it in his palm. Jungkook unfolded the paper. There was only one sentence. The person who saves Jungkook will be the person who destroys him. Taehyung stared at the message. RM went silent. Completely. Jin looked at Suga. J-Hope whispered, that sounds like a warning. Suga shook his head. No, everyone looked at him. It sounds like a prediction. Jungkook slowly looked at Jimin. What happened after you caught that person? Completely. Jimin's voice became almost inaudible. I called someone. Who? Jimin stared at the floor. The same person who later told me to blame Taehyung. Jungkook's expression changed. You called them for help. Yes, and they came. Yes. Who came? Completely. Jimin finally looked at Jungkook. Someone you trusted. Jungkook's eyes narrowed. Jimin said nothing. Suga immediately stepped forward. Jimin, answer him. Jimin's breathing became uneven. Then before he could speak, completely, the hospital monitor beside Jungkook suddenly began beeping faster. Jungkook grabbed his chest. Wait, Jin rushed toward him. Jungkook! Jungkook's face went pale. He was staring at something beyond everyone's shoulders. I remember. Completely. Jimin moved closer. What do you remember? Jungkook whispered. The person who was behind me on the stage. Taehyung leaned forward. Who was it? Jungkook looked directly at Jimin. It wasn't Taehyung. Jimin's eyes widened. Jungkook continued. Completely. It was you. The room went completely silent, because for the first time, Jungkook remembered seeing Jimin's hand near the equipment just seconds before he fell, and now he had to decide whether that memory was real. Completely, or whether someone had planted it inside his mind. Jungkook's last words changed the entire room. It was you. Jimin stood frozen beside the hospital bed. Taehyung looked at Jungkook, then at Jimin, unable to understand what he had just heard. RM stepped closer. Jungkook. Completely. What exactly do you remember? Jungkook pressed one hand against his forehead. I remember someone behind me. His breathing became heavier. I remember the sound of metal. Jimin whispered, Jungkook, don't. Jungkook looked at him. Let me finish. Completely. Jimin immediately stopped. Jungkook closed his eyes. The memory returned in fragments. The stage lights, the music, the sudden movement behind him, a hand near his shoulder, a voice saying his name, then the sound of something falling. Completely. I turned around, Jungkook whispered. I saw you. Jimin's face became pale. What did I do? I don't know. Then why did you say it was me? Because you were there. I was trying to help you. Maybe. Jimin flinched. Completely. That single word hurt more than anything else. Taehyung stepped closer. Jungkook, you were injured. Your memory could be incomplete. Suga nodded. Exactly. We cannot treat a fragmented memory as proof. Jungkook looked at him. I know. Lee. Then he looked back at Jimin. But I also remember something else. Jimin swallowed. What? You told me not to turn around. Jimin froze. I said that? Jungkook nodded. You said, don't look behind you. Jimin's eyes widened. I did say that. Lee. Why? Because there was something dangerous behind you. What? I didn't know. Then why were you there? Jimin lowered his head. Because I saw the equipment move. Suga immediately asked, and you went toward it? Yes. Why? Lee. Because Jungkook was closest. Taehyung looked at him. Then you were trying to save him. Jimin nodded. Yes. Jungkook stared at him. But your hand was near the control equipment because I was trying to stop it. With what? My hand. Lee. That makes no sense. The system was controlled remotely. Jimin shook his head. Not completely. RM looked at him. What do you mean? There was an emergency override. Suga's eyes widened. You knew about it? Lee. I was shown during rehearsal. By whom? Jimin hesitated. The coordinator. The same man who had entered the hospital room. Suga's expression hardened. So he taught you how to override the system. Yes. And you used it that night? I tried. Lee. Did it work? Jimin shook his head. No. Why? Because someone had already changed the settings. Jungkook looked at him. Who? Jimin whispered. I don't know. Taehyung suddenly spoke. Wait, everyone turned. Lee. If Jimin was trying to shut down the system, then whoever changed the settings knew he would try. Suga nodded, which means they were watching him. RM looked toward the door, and maybe they wanted Jimin to be seen near the equipment. Lee. Jimin's eyes widened. Exactly, Suga said. Jungkook stared at the floor. Then the memory was manipulated. Suga looked at him. Maybe. Someone wanted me to remember Jimin standing behind me. Lee. Because they knew you would blame him. Jimin whispered, and they knew I would blame Taehyung. Taehyung looked at him. Why me? Because they positioned you beside Jungkook, so everyone would see you touching him. Yes, Lee. Taehyung shook his head slowly. They planned every angle. Jin spoke from the other side of the room, but there's still something missing. Everyone looked at him. Why would someone go through all this trouble just to break the team apart? Lee. Suga answered, because they want something. What? We don't know yet. Jungkook looked at the USB drive still lying on the table. The recording. Suga nodded. That may tell us. Jimin immediately said, don't play it here. Lee. Jungkook looked at him. Why? Because we don't know what it contains. That's exactly why we need to hear it. What if it triggers something? What if not knowing is worse? Jimin had no answer. Jungkook reached toward the USB drive. Lee. The coordinator was still standing near the door. You said there were 7 recordings. The man nodded. Yes, play mine, not here. Then where? Somewhere private. Suga stepped forward. You're not taking Jungkook anywhere. Lee. I never said I would. Then give us the drive. The man smiled. You still don't understand. Understand what? The recording isn't the weapon. Jungkook looked at him. Then what is? The man looked directly at Jimin. The reaction. Jimin froze. Lee. What? They don't need the recording to destroy you. They only need to make you believe it. Jungkook understood immediately. Psychological manipulation. The man nodded. Exactly. RM looked disturbed. Lee. So all of this was designed to make us question our own memories. Yes. J-Hope shook his head. That's sick. The man shrugged. It works. Taehyung looked at Jimin. It worked on you. Jimin lowered his head. Yes. Jungkook looked at him. Lee. And now it's working on me. Jimin's eyes filled with tears. I'm sorry. Jungkook didn't answer. Suddenly, Suga's phone rang again. He checked the screen. Security, he answered. Yes, his expression changed. What do you mean he left? Lee. Everyone looked at him. Who left? Suga ended the call. The coordinator. RM frowned. He was just here. He left while we were talking. J-Hope looked toward the hallway. How? Suga shook his head. Security says he used an authorized pass. Lee. Jimin slowly shook his head. Whose? Suga checked his phone. Then whose? He looked at RM. RM frowned. What? Suga showed him the security log. The access pass belonged to one of the members. RM's face changed. Lee. That's impossible. Jungkook asked. Who? Suga looked around the room. Nobody wanted to say it. Finally, he whispered, Jin's. Jin stared at him. My pass? Yes. I've had it with me all night. Then someone duplicated it. Lee. Jin immediately checked his pocket. His access card was still there. Taehyung looked toward the door. So they can duplicate cards. Suga nodded. Or they can alter the system. Jimin whispered, then my card may never have been stolen. Lee. Everyone turned toward him. What do you mean? Jimin said, maybe they copied it. Suga looked at him. That changes everything. Jungkook stared at Jimin. Why? Because if they copied my card, they never needed to physically take it. Completely. Jimin's eyes widened. Then the person I saw holding it. He stopped. Jungkook asked, "What? It may have been a fake." Suga nodded slowly. Exactly. Taehyung looked confused. Then why make Jimin believe his card was stolen? Completely. To make him believe he had already been compromised, Suga answered. And to make us suspect him. RM looked toward the hallway. So the person behind this wants us constantly chasing false evidence. Jungkook stared at the USB drive. Completely. Then the only thing we can trust is what we experience ourselves. Jimin looked at him. Even your memory. Jungkook paused. I don't know. Jimin stepped closer. Then trust me. Jungkook looked at him. I want to. But, completely. I need you to stop hiding things. Jimin nodded. I will. Suddenly, Taehyung's phone vibrated. He checked it and immediately froze. What? J-Hope asked. Taehyung didn't answer. Jungkook noticed his expression. Show me. Completely. Taehyung slowly turned the phone around. A message was displayed. The next person will be Taehyung. Underneath it was another sentence. And Jimin will have to choose again. Jimin's face went white. No. Completely. Jungkook immediately reached for Taehyung's phone. When did you receive this? Just now. Suga looked at the clock. That means whoever sent it knows exactly what we're doing. RM whispered, they're still inside the building. Completely. J-Hope moved toward the door. We need security. Suga stopped him. No. Why? Because if they can manipulate access records, we don't know who we can trust. Jungkook looked at everyone. Then nobody goes anywhere alone. Taehyung nodded. Completely. Jimin stepped beside him. For a moment, the two of them looked at each other. There was still pain between them, but something else was beginning to replace it. Understanding. Then the hospital monitor beside Jungkook suddenly beeped again. Completely. A nurse rushed into the room. Jungkook, you need to lie back down. Jungkook obeyed, but as the nurse adjusted the monitor, she noticed something beneath the bed. A small black recording device. Everyone stared at it. Suga slowly picked it up. Completely. There was a red light blinking. It had been recording the entire conversation. Jimin's face went pale. Taehyung whispered, they heard everything. Suga looked at the device. Not everything. He turned it over. There was a label stuck to the back. Completely. 5 letters. Jimin. Jungkook looked at him. Why would they label it with Jimin's name? Suga stared at Jimin. Because they want us to believe he planted it. Jimin shook his head. I didn't. Jungkook looked at him. I know. Completely. But then Suga noticed a second label beneath the first one, partly hidden by tape. He slowly removed it. A different name appeared. Jungkook, and suddenly nobody knew whether the device had been planted to spy on Jimin, to spy on Jungkook, completely, or to make them turn against each other one more time. A small recording device continued blinking in Suga's hand. Nobody spoke. Jungkook stared at the 2 labels, one with Jimin's name and one with his own. Turn it off, RM said quietly. Suga pressed the button, but the red light remained on. Completely. He pressed it again. Nothing happened. It's remotely controlled, Suga said. Jin immediately stepped away from it. Then someone can still be listening. Probably. Can we destroy it? J-Hope asked. Suga shook his head. Completely. Not until we know what's inside. Jungkook looked at him. Can you copy the files? Maybe. Do it. Suga nodded. Jimin stood completely still. They were listening to us. Taehyung looked at him. Completely. They wanted to hear what we would say after you told the truth. Jimin whispered, why? To see who breaks first. Jimin looked at Jungkook. Maybe me. Jungkook shook his head. No. Jimin looked surprised. Why? Because you already broke. Completely. Jimin lowered his eyes. It was true. He had spent weeks trying to carry everything alone, and now every secret was falling apart in front of everyone. Suga connected the device to his phone using an adapter from his bag. A file appeared. Completely. 1 file only. Its name was 77. Suga frowned. Why room 7? Jin asked. This is Jungkook's room. No, Suga replied. Not according to the hospital system. Everyone looked at him. What does that mean? Completely. There are 7 private rooms in this section. RM understood immediately. They aren't talking about this room. Then what room? J-Hope asked. Suga looked at Jimin. Maybe Jimin knows. Jimin shook his head. I don't think. I really don't. Completely. Jungkook stared at the file. Play it. Suga hesitated. It could be dangerous. We're already in danger, Suga. Pressed play. At first, there was only static. Then a voice appeared. It was Jimin's voice. Jungkook, if you're hearing this, I failed. Completely. Jimin's face went pale. He stepped backward. I never recorded that. The recording continued. I need you to know that everything I said tonight was not the whole truth. Jungkook looked at Jimin. Jimin shook his head. I swear I didn't make this. Completely. I know, Jungkook said. The recording continued. Taehyung didn't push you. I knew that before you fell. Taehyung froze. Jimin stared at the phone. What? The recording continued. I saw the person behind the equipment. Completely. I saw them reach for the emergency controls. I knew Taehyung was trying to pull you away. Jungkook's eyes widened. Then why did Jimin blame Taehyung? The recording answered before anyone could. Completely. Because they told me they would hurt Jungkook if I told the truth. Jimin covered his mouth. Tears filled his eyes. That's what I said. Suga paused the recording. Wait. Jungkook looked at him. What? Completely. This recording contains information Jimin told us only minutes ago. RM frowned. So it was recorded after the accident. Suga shook his head. No. How do you know? Listen to the background. He played it again. Completely. Beneath Jimin's voice was a faint sound. A machine. A hospital monitor. Jin looked at Jungkook's monitor. That sounds like this room. Suga nodded. Jimin whispered. Then someone recorded me after I came here. Completely. But the device was under the bed, Taehyung said. And the file was already there. Suga nodded. Which means someone expected us to discover it. Jungkook stared at the device. It's bait. Suga looked at him. Yes. Completely. They want us to hear Jimin confessing. Yes. But if the recording is fake, Suga stopped. What? Jungkook asked. There's a problem. Suga replayed the audio. He listened carefully. Then he looked at Jimin. That is your voice. Jimin nodded. Completely. Yes, but you never said those words. No, then someone generated it. RM frowned. You mean they created a fake recording using Jimin's voice? Suga nodded. Possibly. Jin looked disturbed. Then anything can be fabricated. Exactly. Completely. Taehyung stared at Jimin. Even conversations, Jimin whispered. Then the recording they sent me about Jungkook. Suga looked at him. Could also have been fake. Jimin's eyes widened. Completely. That means I accused Taehyung based on something that wasn't real. Yes. Jimin looked devastated. I destroyed his trust because of a lie. Taehyung looked at him. You didn't know it was a lie. I should have questioned it. Maybe. Completely. Taehyung took a breath. But you were scared. Jimin looked at him. Why are you still defending me? Taehyung answered quietly. Because whoever did this wanted me to hate you. Jimin's eyes filled with tears again. Taehyung continued. Completely. And I'm not going to give them what they want. Jungkook looked at Taehyung. Thank you. Taehyung nodded. Then the recording suddenly continued by itself. Suga had stopped playback, but the device began playing another section. Everyone froze. Completely. A different voice appeared. They're listening. Jimin looked around. The voice continued. Don't trust the person who says they are protecting you. Jungkook looked at Jimin. The voice said, especially Jimin. Jimin closed his eyes. Again. Completely. Jungkook said. Suga replayed it. The voice was distorted, but the message was clear, especially Jimin. Then another voice appeared. This one sounded familiar. Very familiar. Jungkook's face changed. Wait. Suga paused. What? Completely. Jungkook looked at him. I know that voice. Everyone turned toward him. Who? Jungkook stared at the speaker. I don't know the name. Jimin stepped closer. But I've heard it before. Where? Jungkook closed his eyes. Another memory appeared. Completely. A dark hallway. Someone speaking quietly. You have to forget what you saw. Jungkook opened his eyes. Before I joined the company. Suga's expression became serious. Are you sure? Yes. Can you identify it? Completely. Jungkook listened again. The voice repeated the sentence, don't trust the person who says they are protecting you. Jungkook shook his head. Not yet. Then the recording changed. A new voice appeared. He remembers. Everyone froze. Who said that? Completely. J-Hope asked. The voice continued. If he remembers, we lose everything. Another voice answered, then make him believe Jimin betrayed him. Jimin's face went white. Jungkook stared at the device. They planned this. Suga nodded. Yes. Completely. They wanted me to hate Jimin. Yes. And they wanted Jimin to blame Taehyung's. Yes. Why? Nobody answered. The recording suddenly became louder. Because Taehyung knows. Taehyung froze. Knows what? The recording continued. Completely. He saw what happened that night. Taehyung's face changed. Jungkook looked at him. What night? Taehyung looked confused. I don't know. The recording continued. If Taehyung remembers, he becomes the next problem. Taehyung stepped backward. No. Completely. Jimin looked at him. Think. Taehyung closed his eyes. I remember being younger. Jungkook stared at him. Before debut? Yes. Were you with me? Taehyung nodded slowly. I think so. Jimin looked between them. Completely. You two knew each other before? Jungkook shook his head. Not like that. Taehyung frowned. Wait. He pressed his fingers against his temple. There was a building. Jungkook suddenly felt another sharp pain in his head. A dark hallway. Completely. Taehyung looked at him. Yes, a car outside. Yes, someone arguing. Yes. The two stared at each other. Jimin looked frightened. What are you remembering? Jungkook whispered. I don't know. Taehyung suddenly said there was a third person. Completely. Jungkook looked at him. Who? Taehyung shook his head. I can't see the face. Jimin stepped closer. What did they say? Taehyung closed his eyes. They told us to stay quiet. Jungkook's breathing became heavier. Why were we there? Completely. Taehyung whispered. Because someone had been hurt. The room went silent. Jimin looked at Suga. What does that mean? Suga didn't answer. He was staring at the recording device. The file had changed again. A new title appeared. 7. Completely. Jungkook stared at it. Play it. Suga hesitated. Jungkook, play it. Suga pressed the button. The audio began with a younger voice. Jungkook recognized it immediately. It was his own voice. I didn't do anything. Then another voice said, completely. Nobody said you did. Jungkook's breathing stopped. The voice continued, but if anyone finds out you were there, they'll blame you. Taehyung whispered, I remember that. Jungkook looked at him. You were there. Yes. Completely. Then why don't I remember you? Taehyung's eyes filled with tears. Because they told us to forget each other. Jimin stared at them in shock. Who? The recording answered, the person you trusted. Jungkook's eyes widened. Completely. The recording suddenly stopped. Suga looked at the screen. It ended. Jimin whispered, no. Jungkook stared at the blank display. Someone erased the rest. Then the hospital door slowly opened. A nurse stood there holding a file. Completely. She looked to interrupt. Nobody answered. She continued, the doctor needs to speak with you. Jungkook looked at her suspiciously. About what? The nurse glanced at Jimin, then at Taehyung. Completely. About the results from your blood test. Jungkook frowned. What about it? The nurse hesitated. The doctor found something unusual. Suga immediately stepped forward. What? The nurse lowered her voice. Completely. There is a substance in his system that shouldn't be there. Everyone froze. Jungkook looked at Jimin. Jimin looked horrified. Taehyung whispered, then the fall wasn't the only thing that happened. The nurse nodded. Completely. That's what the doctor believes. And suddenly the entire story changed again, because if someone had put something into Jungkook's system before the performance, completely, then the person behind the accident had planned far more than a simple fall. And Jimin's decision to blame Taehyung may have been exactly the distraction they needed. The nurse's words left everyone silent. There is a substance in his system that shouldn't be there. Jungkook stared at her, trying to process what he had just heard. What substance? The nurse shook her head. The doctor is still running tests. Completely. We don't know exactly what it is yet. Suga immediately stepped forward. Could it have caused him to collapse? It may have contributed to his condition. RM's expression hardened. Could someone have given it to him? The nurse hesitated. Completely. We cannot say that yet. Jin looked toward Jungkook. What did he consume before the performance? J-Hope started thinking water, the usual supplements, maybe a drink backstage. Taehyung suddenly looked at Jimin. The drink. Jimin's face changed. Completely. What? Taehyung asked. Who gave you the drink before the performance? Jungkook thought for a moment. I don't remember. Jimin immediately said, I do. Everyone looked at him. Who? Jimin swallowed. I gave it to him. Completely. Jungkook stared at him. You? Jimin nodded. Yes. Taehyung's expression changed. Where did you get it? Jimin closed his eyes. From backstage. Suga's voice became firm. From whom? Jimin didn't answer. Jimin, a staff member. Completely. Which staff member? Jimin looked terrified. I don't know his name. Taehyung shook his head. Again? Jimin looked at him. What? Every time something happens, you say you don't know. Jimin lowered his head. I know. Jungkook looked at him. Completely. Did you open it? No. Did you see anyone touch it? Jimin hesitated. Yes. Jimin whispered, the same man with the silver watch. Suga immediately looked at RM. There. RM nodded. Completely. That connects the stage and the drink. The nurse looked uncomfortable. I need to get the doctor. She turned toward the door. Suga stopped her. Wait. She looked back. Was this test done immediately after he arrived? Yes. Completely. Then who has access to the sample? The medical laboratory. How many people? Several authorized staff. Suga's expression became serious. Could someone alter the results? The nurse looked shocked. That would be extremely difficult. Completely. But possible? She hesitated. Technically, yes. Then don't let the sample leave this floor until the doctor comes. The nurse nodded and hurried away. JUNGKOOK watched her disappear. Suga! Yes! Sweetly. You think they could manipulate the blood test too? I think we shouldn't assume anything is impossible anymore. JIMIN sat down in the chair beside the bed. His hands were shaking. This is my fault. JUNGKOOK looked at him. No. Sweetly. I gave you the drink. You didn't know. But I should have. JIMIN, I should have checked. JUNGKOOK reached toward him. Look at me. JIMIN slowly lifted his eyes. You were trying to protect me, and I almost got you killed. Sweetly. The words came out so quietly that everyone heard them. TAEHYUNG looked away. RM stepped closer. Nobody knows that yet. JIMIN shook his head. But if I had told everyone about the messages, Suga interrupted, we would have acted sooner. Yes, sweetly. You made a mistake, but the person responsible is still the one who planned this. JIMIN looked at him. You really believe that? Yes, even after everything I did, especially after everything you did. JIMIN frowned. Suga continued, sweetly, because whoever manipulated you knew exactly what fear would make you do. JUNGKOOK looked toward the ceiling. They wanted JIMIN isolated. Yes, they wanted TAEHYUNG blamed. Yes, they wanted me confused. Yes, sweetly. And now they want us to believe JIMIN poisoned me. Suga nodded. Exactly, TAEHYUNG suddenly spoke. Then maybe the drink wasn't poisoned. Everyone looked at him. What do you mean? RM asked. TAEHYUNG said, sweetly. Maybe the substance entered his system another way. Suga looked at him. Like? TAEHYUNG thought for a moment. The hospital. Jin frowned. You think it happened? I don't know. But if someone knew he would be brought here, sweetly, they could have planned for it. JIMIN immediately stood up. Then JUNGKOOK isn't safe. The heart monitor accelerated slightly as JUNGKOOK moved. Calm down, Jin said. But JIMIN was already looking toward the hallway. We need to move him. Sweetly, Suga stopped him. No. Why? Because moving him without knowing who controls the hospital system could put him in more danger. Then what do we do? Suga looked at everyone. We stay. RM nodded. Together, J-Hope locked the door again. Sweetly. Jin pulled the curtains closed. TAEHYUNG moved beside JUNGKOOK. JIMIN remained near the bed. For several minutes, nothing happened. Then the phone on the table buzzed. JUNGKOOK looked at it. Another unknown message. Sweetly. You are looking in the wrong place. Suga read it over his shoulder. Another message arrived. The substance was not the attack. Then a third. The attack hasn't started yet. JIMIN's face went pale. What does that mean? Nobody answered. Sweetly. Suddenly the lights flickered again. Once. Twice. Then they returned to normal. A second later, the heart monitor beside JUNGKOOK began making an unfamiliar sound. Jin immediately looked at the screen. His heart rate is dropping. What? Sweetly. J-Hope shouted. Suga moved toward the monitor. JUNGKOOK tried to speak, but his voice was weak. I'm okay. No, you're not, Jin said. Call the doctor. RM ran into the hallway. Doctor! The nurse rushed toward the room. What happened? Sweetly. His heart rate is dropping. The nurse immediately checked the monitor. Get the doctor now. JIMIN stood beside JUNGKOOK, terrified. JUNGKOOK, stay with me. JUNGKOOK looked at him. I'm here. Don't close your eyes. I'm not. Sweetly. TAEHYUNG held JUNGKOOK's hand. Keep breathing. JUNGKOOK nodded. The nurse checked the IV line. Then she froze. Wait! Suga noticed. What? She looked at the bag hanging beside JUNGKOOK's bed. This wasn't the same IV. Jin frowned. Sweetly. What do you mean? The bag I started earlier had a different label. Suga immediately grabbed the bag. Who changed it? The nurse shook her head. I don't know. RM returned with the doctor. Sweetly. The doctor looked at the IV bag and immediately became serious. Stop the infusion. The nurse disconnected it. What was in it? The doctor asked. I don't know. He looked at the label. This is not the medication prescribed for him. Sweetly. Everyone froze. JUNGKOOK looked at JIMIN. JIMIN looked horrified. Someone changed his IV. The doctor nodded. We need to stabilize him immediately. Medical staff rushed into the room. RM pulled everyone back. Give them space. Sweetly. JIMIN refused to move. I'm staying. TAEHYUNG grabbed his shoulder. Let them work. JIMIN looked at JUNGKOOK, tears running down his face. I'm sorry. JUNGKOOK managed to whisper, stop blaming yourself. Then the doctors surrounded him. Sweetly. The members were forced toward the wall. Suga looked at the IV bag. Whoever did this had access to his room. Jin whispered and knew exactly when to change it. J-Hope looked toward the hallway. Sweetly. The nurse said the lights flickered before his condition changed. RM nodded. Someone used the power interruption as cover. Suga looked at the security camera outside the room. Then we need the footage. He stepped into the hallway. Immediately, a security officer approached him. "Sir, the camera footage from this corridor is unavailable." Suga stopped. "Oh, Dervin?" The system restarted. "When?" "About 2 minutes ago." Suga looked back toward the room. 2 minutes. Immediately, he immediately understood. The blackout hadn't been random, it had been timed. Suga returned to the room and whispered to RM, "Someone changed Jungkook's IV during the blackout." RM's face hardened. "Then they're still close." Jimin heard them. Immediately, "We need to find them." Suga shook his head. "No, we need to protect Jungkook." Jimin looked toward the bed. The doctors were still working. Taehyung stood beside Jungkook, holding his hand. Jimin slowly approached. "Can I?" Taehyung looked at him. Immediately. For a moment, there was hesitation. Then Taehyung stepped aside. Jimin took Jungkook's hand. "I'm here." Jungkook opened his eyes slightly. "I know. I won't hide anything anymore." Jungkook squeezed his fingers weakly. "Promise?" "Promise." Immediately. The doctor looked up. "His condition is stabilizing." Everyone breathed again, but then the doctor noticed something on the bedside table, a small folded note. "Was this here before?" Jin picked it up. "No." Suga immediately stopped him. Immediately. "Don't touch it." He put on gloves and opened it carefully. Jimin salved him once. Now he will have to choose 2 dies. Jimin's face went blank. Jungkook slowly looked toward him. "Choose?" Immediately. Suga stared at the note. "This is a threat," Jimin whispered. "They're coming for one of us." Taehyung looked at Jungkook. "Who?" Nobody knew. Then Jimin's phone vibrated. He looked at the screen and froze. A live photograph had been sent to him. Immediately. It showed the hospital room from outside the window. Jungkook was visible in the bed. Jimin was standing beside him. Taehyung was on the other side. The photograph had been taken only seconds earlier. Beneath it was one sentence. Immediately. "You'll have 10 minutes. Jimin looked up. 10 minutes for what? Another message arrived. "Choose between Jungkook and Taehyung." Jimin's hands began shaking. Jungkook saw the message. "No." Jimin looked at him. "They're making me choose again." Immediately. Jungkook's voice became weak but firm. "Then don't choose." Jimin stared at him. "What? Choose all of us." Taehyung looked at Jungkook. "What are you planning?" Jungkook slowly turned toward Suga. "We stop reacting." Suga understood. Immediately. "We set a trap." RM nodded. "Use the threat against them." J-Hope looked toward the camera. "Make them think Jimin has chosen." Jimin stared at them. "And then?" Jungkook looked at him. "Then we find out who is watching." The room became quiet. Immediately. For the first time, Jimin understood that the next move would not be made by the person threatening them. It would be made by them. But there was one problem none of them had considered. Immediately. Whoever was watching had already predicted that they would try to set a trap. And just as Jimin prepared to send the message, his phone received one final photograph. It showed Suga standing outside the hospital room earlier that night, immediately, speaking to someone in the hallway. The face of the person beside him had been blurred. Underneath the photograph were 5 words that made Suga lose all color from his face. "You never told them about me." Suga stared at the screen, immediately. And for the first time that night, Jungkook realized there was another secret in the room that had nothing to do with Jimin, Taehyung, or the accident. And Suga had been hiding it from everyone. "You never told them about me." The message remained on Suga's phone, and for the first time since Jungkook had been brought into the hospital, Suga looked genuinely shaken. Not angry, not suspicious. Afraid. Jungkook noticed it immediately. "Hyung." Immediately. Suga didn't answer. "Who is that?" Suga slowly lowered the phone. "Nobody." Jungkook stared at him. "Don't do that." "Do what?" "Lie." Suga looked at Jungkook, then at the others. RM stepped closer. "Youngie." Immediately. "Whoever sent that message knows something about you." Suga remained silent. Jin's expression became serious. "We're past the point where keeping secrets protects anyone." J-Hope nodded. "If that person is connected to what happened tonight, immediately, we need to know." "What did you hide?" Suga finally took a slow breath. "About 6 months ago, I received a message." Jimin looked at him. "From the same person? I don't know. What did it say?" Suga hesitated. "Immediately. It said someone was watching the team." Jungkook's eyes narrowed. "And you didn't tell us. I thought it was a threat meant to scare us." "Then what happened?" Suga looked at his phone. "A week later, I received another message." Immediately, it contained a photograph. "Of what?" RM asked. Suga's eyes moved toward Jungkook. "Of you." Jungkook froze. "Me? You were outside a building." "Which building?" "The old training facility." Jungkook frowned. "I haven't been there in years." Completely. Exactly. Suga continued, the photograph was taken recently. Jimin stepped closer. Someone was watching Jungkook before the accident. Yes. Why didn't you tell him? Because the message said, if I told anyone. Completely. The next photograph would be of someone else. Jin frowned. Who? Suga looked at him. Jimin's face changed. Me? Yes. Did you get another photograph? 3. Jimin swallowed. Of me? Yes. Where? Outside the studio. Completely. Outside the dorm. And one outside your family home. Jimin's eyes widened. You knew? Yes. For 6 months? Yes. Jimin looked devastated. Then all this time, you knew I was being watched. I knew someone was watching you. Completely. And you said nothing. Because I thought silence would keep you safe. Jimin shook his head. It didn't. Suga looked down. I know. Jungkook stepped forward despite his injuries. What else? Suga looked at him. There was one more message. Completely. What did it say? It said that one day, the person watching us would force the team to choose between loyalty and truth. Jungkook looked around the room. That day is today. Suga nodded. Yes. The realization hit everyone at once. Completely. This wasn't a random attack. It had been building for months. Every message, every suspicious photograph, every strange coincidence. Someone had been studying them long before Jungkook fell on stage. RM asked, why didn't you tell me? Completely. Suga looked at him. Because I was afraid you'd involve the company. I would have. That's why. RM's expression hardened. You don't get to decide alone whether the team deserves to know they're in danger. Suga nodded. You're right. Completely. Jin looked at Suga. Who was the person in the photograph? Suga looked at the screen again. I don't know, but the message says, you never told them about me. Yes, so you've met them. Maybe. J-Hope frowned. Maybe. Suga slowly said, completely. There was someone I spoke to before. Jungkook stared at him. When? Years ago. Who? Suga hesitated. Someone who worked around the company. TAEHYUNG asked, a staff member? Not exactly. Then who? Suga closed his eyes for a moment. Completely. A former consultant. RM immediately recognized the description. The person who helped with security planning? Suga nodded. Yes. Jimin looked at him. Was that the same person who trained the coordinator? Possibly. Why did you speak to him? Completely. Suga's voice became quieter. Because he approached me after I noticed irregularities in our schedules. Jungkook asked, what irregularities? Someone was changing transportation routes without informing us. Jin looked shocked. Completely. That happened to us. Several times. Why didn't we know? Because the changes were always corrected before anyone noticed. J-Hope whispered, someone had access to our schedules. Yes. For how long? At least a year. Jungkook stared at Suga. Completely. And you kept all of this to yourself. Suga nodded. I thought I could handle it. Jungkook's expression hardened. You couldn't. Suga accepted it. I know. Jimin suddenly looked at the photograph on the phone. Wait. Everyone turned toward him. Completely. What? Jimin pointed at the blurred figure beside Suga. I know that jacket. TAEHYUNG stepped closer. What jacket? The person standing beside Suga. You recognize it? Yes. From where? Jimin looked frightened. The control room. Silence. Completely. Suga looked at him. You're sure? I saw the same jacket that night. Jungkook's eyes narrowed. So the person you saw before the accident was connected to Suga? Jimin nodded slowly. I think so. Suga looked at the photograph again. Completely. The face is blurred, but the jacket isn't. TAEHYUNG took the phone. There's something on the sleeve. He zoomed in. A small symbol appeared. RM immediately recognized it. That logo. Jin looked at him. What? RM said. Completely. It belonged to an old security contractor. Suga's expression changed. That's impossible. Why? That contractor's contract ended years ago, J-Hope asked. Then why would someone still be wearing their jacket? Nobody answered. Completely. Jungkook slowly leaned back against the pillow. Because they never really left. The room fell silent. Then the hospital door opened. A security officer entered. Mr. Jaeon? Jungkook looked toward him. Yes, we need to move you to another room. Completely. Suga immediately stepped forward. Why? For security reasons. Who officer checked his tablet? Hospital administration. Name? I don't have it. Suga's eyes narrowed. Then you're not moving him. The officer looked at him. Completely. Sir, I need to follow procedure. No. The officer stopped. Excuse me? You're not taking him anywhere until we verify the order. RM stepped beside Suga. He's right. The officer looked uncomfortable. This is urgent. Completely. Jimin stared at the man's uniform. Something felt wrong. Wait. The officer looked at him. What? Jimin whispered. Your badge. What about it? It's different. Suga immediately looked at the badge. Everyone stepped back. Completely. The officer suddenly reached toward his pocket. Taehyung moved in front of Jungkook. Jin pulled Jimin behind him. J-Hope reached for the emergency button. The officer stopped when he realized he was surrounded. I'm not here to hurt him. Completely. Suga stared at him. Then prove it. The man slowly removed a phone from his pocket. I received instructions to move Jungkook. From whom? I don't know. Then you're leaving. The officer looked toward the hallway. You don't understand. Completely. We understand enough. He suddenly dropped the phone onto the floor. The screen displayed a message. Room 7 is compromised. Suga stared at it. How did you get that message? The officer didn't answer. Who sent it? Still nothing. Completely. Then the phone began ringing. Nobody moved. Finally, Suga picked it up. The caller ID showed a name, not a number, a name everyone in the room recognized. Jimin whispered, no. Jungkook looked at him. Who? Jimin stared at the screen. Completely. The person I called the night I found someone in Jungkook's room. Suga's eyes widened. Answer it. Jimin shook his head. What if it's a trap? Jungkook said, everything tonight is a trap. Jimin looked at him. Then what do we do? Completely. Jungkook stared at the phone. We make them think they still control us. Jimin understood. He took the phone. I'll answer. Everyone went silent as Jimin pressed the call button. Hello? For several seconds there was nothing. Completely. Then a distorted voice spoke. You finally stopped blaming Taehyung. Jimin's face went pale. Who are you? The voice laughed quietly. You still don't recognize me. Jimin tightened his grip on the phone. Tell me who you are. Completely. You saw me that night. Where? Behind Jungkook. Jimin's breathing stopped. Jungkook immediately looked at him. The voice continued, you opened the door for me. Jimin whispered, you were there. Yes. You were the one in the control room. Completely. Yes. Why? Because Jungkook was never the target. Everyone froze. Jungkook looked toward the phone. Then who was? The voice became quiet. You were. Jimin's eyes widened. What does that mean? Completely. It means the accident was never supposed to happen to Jungkook. Jungkook stared at the phone. Then who was supposed to get hurt? The voice answered, Taehyung. Taehyung went completely still. Jimin looked at him in horror. No. Completely. The voice continued, and that's why you blamed him. Because you saw what you were supposed to see. Jimin's breathing became unsteady. What did I see? You saw Taehyung standing where the target was supposed to stand. Suga immediately understood. Completely. The positions were changed. The voice laughed. Exactly. Jungkook looked at Taehyung. Someone moved you. Taehyung nodded slowly. I was supposed to be on the other side of the stage. Jimin whispered, I didn't know. Of course you didn't. Completely. The voice became colder. You were manipulated into protecting the wrong person. Jungkook looked at Jimin. Then the accident happened because our positions changed. Yes. Jimin asked, who changed them? The voice paused. You did. Completely. Jimin's face went white. What? You were the one who asked Taehyung to switch places. Taehyung suddenly looked at Jimin. Did you? Jimin shook his head. I don't remember. Because you were told to forget. Jimin whispered. Who told me? Completely. The voice answered, the person you trusted most. Jungkook stared at the phone. Enough games. The voice laughed. You still don't understand, Jungkook. Then explain. Your accident wasn't the beginning. What was the beginning? Completely. The day you met Jimin. Jimin froze. Jungkook looked at him. What? The voice continued. Everything began long before either of you understood what was happening. The call suddenly ended. Nobody spoke. Jimin slowly lowered the phone. Completely. Jungkook stared at him. What did they mean? Jimin shook his head. I don't know. Suga looked toward the door. We need to leave this room. RM nodded. Agreed. But before anyone could move, the hospital lights went out. Darkness swallowed the room. Completely. Jimin immediately grabbed Jungkook's hand. Taehyung stepped toward them. Suga shouted, nobody moves. Then, from somewhere inside the darkness, a voice whispered directly behind them. Too late. The lights came back on. Everyone turned. Completely. The security officer was gone. The hospital door was wide open, and on Jungkook's bed lay a single photograph that none of them had seen before. It showed Jimin and Jungkook standing together years earlier, completely, long before either of them knew someone had been watching them. On the back of the photograph were 6 words that made Jimin's entire body freeze. You were never supposed to meet him. The photograph lay on Jungkook's hospital bed, and nobody dared touch it. Jimin stared at the image as if the past had suddenly walked into the room and demanded an explanation. Jungkook looked at the photograph, then at Jimin. When was this taken? Completely. Jimin slowly shook his head. I don't know. Look at it. I am. That's us. I know. Before we debuted, Jimin nodded. The photograph showed two much younger versions of them standing outside an old building. They weren't posing for a camera, neatly. They were simply standing beside each other, looking in different directions, but something about the image felt wrong. There was a third figure reflected faintly in the glass behind them. Someone had been watching. Neatly. Suga finally picked up the photograph using a tissue. He turned it over. The 6 words remained visible. You were never supposed to meet him. Jin looked at Jimin. Who is him? Jimin didn't answer. Jungkook stared at him. Do you remember this day? Neatly. Jimin closed his eyes. Not clearly. Try. Jimin took a breath. I remember training. Anything else? Rain. What about this building? Jimin shook his head. I don't know. Taehyung suddenly stepped closer. I know that place. Neatly. Everyone turned toward him. Where? Taehyung pointed at the photograph. That building. Jungkook looked at him. You've seen it? Yes. When? Before we debuted. Suga's expression changed. You were there too? Taehyung nodded slowly. Neatly. I think so. Jimin stared at him. Why don't any of us remember? Taehyung whispered. Because someone wanted us to forget. RM took the photograph from Suga and studied the background. Look! He pointed at the window reflection. There's a sign. Neatly. Jin leaned closer. Barely. Suga took a picture of the photograph and enlarged it. A faded word appeared. Mireille. J-Hope frowned. What is that? Suga shook his head. I don't know. Jimin suddenly whispered, I do. Neatly. Everyone looked at him. Mireille was the name of a small training facility. Jungkook frowned. Training facility? Before the company moved some trainees to the main building. Why were we there? I don't remember. Suga looked at Taehyung. Neatly. You said you were there too. Taehyung nodded. Yes. What do you remember? Taehyung closed his eyes. There was a hallway. Jungkook immediately looked at him. Dark hallways, yes. A car outside, yes. Someone had been hurt? Taehyung nodded. Neatly, yes. Jimin looked terrified. What happened? Taehyung opened his eyes. We saw someone lying on the ground. Who? I don't know, Jungkook asked. Were we together? Yes. Jimin looked at Jungkook. Then why don't I remember? Neatly. Suga answered quietly, because whatever happened that night was deliberately buried. Jimin shook his head. But why us? RMs looked at the photograph again. Maybe you weren't chosen because of who you were. Jungkook looked at him. Then why? Neatly. Maybe you were chosen because of what you saw. The room became silent. Jimin suddenly remembered something. There was a room. Everyone turned toward him. What room? A small office. What happened there? Neatly. Jimin pressed his fingers against his temple. Someone was arguing. Who? I can't see. Keep going. Someone was crying. Who? Jimin breathed heavily. A young man. Jungkook stared at him. Me. Jimin shook his head. No. Then who? Neatly. I don't know. Taehyung suddenly spoke. I remember him. Jimin turned. You do? Taehyung nodded. He was injured. What happened to him? Someone told us to leave. Who? Taehyung hesitated. A man. Suga asked. What did he look like? Neatly. Tae only remember his watch. Jimin immediately looked at him. Silver. Taehyung nodded. Silver. Jungkook's eyes widened. The same man. Suga looked at everyone. Then we have a connection. RM asked. Neatly. The man with the silver watch was there years ago. And now he was backstage, meaning he has been around us for years. Jimin whispered, and I trusted him. Jungkook looked at him. You didn't know, but he knew me. Yes. Neatly. He knew exactly what would scare me. Yes. Jimin lowered his head. That's why he used Taehyung. Taehyung looked at him. He knew you would believe the worst. Jimin nodded. Yes. Jungkook reached for Jimin's hand. And now you know. Neatly. Jimin looked at him. Know what? That fear can make you believe something even when your heart knows it's wrong. Jimin's eyes filled with tears. I hurt you. Jungkook shook his head. You hurt me because you were trying to protect me. Neatly. That doesn't make it okay. No, Jungkook paused, but it doesn't mean I have to hate you. Jimin stared at him. You don't? No. Jimin looked away, trying not to cry. I thought after everything, I'm angry. I know. I'm disappointed. Neatly. I know, but I still trust you. Jimin looked back at him. Why? Jungkook answered simply, 'Cause you stayed. Jimin's tears fell. Even when I was wrong, especially then. Taehyung looked away, giving them space. Suga watched silently. Neatly. For the first time that night, the tension in the room softened, but it lasted only a few seconds. Jungkook suddenly noticed something behind the photograph. Wait. He took it carefully. There was a second image attached to the back. Neatly. Suga pulled it free. It showed the same building from another angle. This time, 3 young figures could be seen standing near the entrance. Jungkook, Jimin, Taehyung and someone else. A fourth person stood behind them. Completely. His face had been scratched out. J-Hope whispered, "Who is that?" Nobody knew. Then Jimin suddenly stepped backward. "I know him." Jungkook looked at him. "Who?" Jimin stared at the photograph. "He was there when I first joined. A trainee?" Completely. "No." "Staff?" "Yes." "What was his name?" Jimin struggled to remember. I think." He suddenly froze. "What?" Jimin whispered, "He was the person who introduced me to the company." Jungkook stared at him. "That doesn't make sense." "Why?" Completely. "Because you were introduced through the normal process." Jimin shook his head. "I know." "Then who was he?" Jimin looked terrified. "He told me he could make sure I stayed." Suga's eyes narrowed. "Stayed?" Completely. "He said there were people who didn't want me there." Taehyung asked, "Why?" "Because I wasn't supposed to be selected." Jungkook stared at him. "What are you saying?" Jimin shook his head. "I don't know." Suga looked at the photograph again. Completely. "Maybe you weren't recruited randomly." Jimin looked at him. "Then why was I recruited?" Suga answered. "Maybe because of Jungkook." Jimin's eyes widened. "No." Jungkook immediately said, "Don't." Suga looked at him. "We need to consider it." Completely. Jungkook shook his head. "Jimin didn't come into my life because someone planned it." Suga remained quiet. "He became my friend because we chose each other." Jimin looked at Jungkook. "But what if?" "No." Jungkook interrupted. Completely. "Don't let them rewrite our history." Jimin stared at him. Jungkook took his hand. "Then we find the truth ourselves." Suddenly, the hospital door opened again. "This is time. Mr. Jaein, I need to speak with you." Completely. Jungkook looked at him. "About the substance," the doctor nodded. Suga stepped forward. "What did you find?" The doctor closed the door behind him. "The substance wasn't a medication error." Everyone became silent. "Then what was it?" Completely. The doctor looked at Jungkook. "A sedative." Jimin's face went pale. "Someone drugged him." The doctor nodded. "We believe so." Jungkook asked, "Could it have affected my memory?" "Yes." Suga immediately looked at Jimin. Completely. "That's why the memories are fragmented." The doctor continued, "But there's something else." "What?" "The dosage wasn't high enough to cause the accident by itself. Then why use it? To make him disoriented." Jungkook understood. Completely. "So I wouldn't remember what happened." The doctor nodded. "Possibly." Jimin looked down. "They wanted him confused." "Yes." "And vulnerable." "Yes." Jungkook looked at Taehyung, then the memory of seeing Jimin. Suga said, "Completely. Could have been influenced by the sedative." Jungkook closed his eyes. "I almost believed it." Jimin whispered, "I know." The doctor looked at Jungkook. "You need rest." Jungkook nodded. "Okay." The doctor left. Nobody spoke for a moment. Completely. Then Suga's phone buzzed again. He checked it. His face changed. "What?" RM asked. Suga turned the phone around. A new message appeared. "They the photograph." J-Hope frowned. "Who is they?" Another message arrived. Completely. "Now ask Jimin why he was the first person to meet the man with the silver watch." Jimin stared at the screen. He couldn't finish. Jungkook looked at him. Jimin's voice trembled. "I met him before I met you." The room went silent. Completely. "How long before?" Jungkook asked. 3 days. "And he told you about me?" "Yes." "What did he say?" Jimin closed his eyes. "He said there was someone at the company who would change my life." Jungkook stared at him. "He was talking about me." "Yes." Completely. "Why? I don't know." Jimin's voice broke. "But now I think he knew we would become close." Taehyung whispered, "That's impossible." Suga shook his head. "Not impossible." Jungkook looked at Jimin. "Did he tell you to trust me?" Jimin nodded. "Yes." Completely. "Did he tell you to protect me?" "Yes." "Did he ever tell you why?" Jimin slowly shook his head. "No." Jungkook's expression became serious. "Then maybe the biggest secret isn't why they wanted us apart." Jimin looked at him. "What is it?" Completely. Jungkook stared at the photograph. "Maybe it's why they wanted us together in the first place." No one spoke. Because suddenly, every memory they had shared seemed capable of having another meaning. Every coincidence. Every first meeting. Completely. Every moment Jimin had stood beside Jungkook, and just as they began to question everything, Jimin's phone received a final message. It contained no photograph this time, only a single sentence. Completely. "Ask Jungkook what he promised me before he ever met you." Jimin looked at Jungkook. Jungkook's face went pale. "I never met him," he whispered. But somewhere deep inside his memory, a forgotten promise was beginning to return. Completely. "I never met him." Jungkook said it quietly, but nobody in the room believed that the matter was finished. Not even Jungkook himself. Jimin stood beside the bed, staring at the message on his phone. "Then why would he say you made him a promise?" Completely. Jungkook shook his head. I don't know. Suga stepped closer. Don't force yourself to remember everything at once. Jungkook looked at him. But if this promise is connected to the accident, I need to know. RM nodded. Completely. Then we find evidence instead of relying on memory. Jin picked up the photograph again. Start with this. He pointed to the old building. We know this place existed. We know all three of you were there. Completely. We know the man with the silver watch was connected to it. We need to know what happened that night. Taehyung looked at Jungkook. And we need to know why we were told to forget. Jimin lowered his head. Maybe I can remember something. Completely. Jungkook immediately looked at him. Don't push yourself. I have to. No. Jungkook, you've already carried this alone for too long. Jimin looked at him. Then let me carry it with you now. Jungkook became silent. Completely. There was something different in Jimin's voice. He wasn't trying to protect Jungkook anymore by hiding the truth. He was finally asking him to face it with him. Jungkook slowly nodded. Okay. Jimin closed his eyes. He tried to picture the building. Completely. The rain, the hallway, the young man lying on the floor, the silver watch. Nothing came clearly, then a voice appeared in his memory. Don't tell Jungkook. Jimin opened his eyes suddenly. Jungkook noticed. What? Someone told me not to tell you. Completely. About what? The injured person. Taehyung stepped closer. I remember that too. Suga looked at him. Who said it? Taehyung shook his head. A man. The silver watch. I think so. Jimin whispered. He said something else. What? Completely. Jimin looked frightened. He said Jungkook had already promised. Jungkook frowned. Promised what? Jimin shook his head. I don't know. Suga looked toward the hospital window. Maybe the promise wasn't made to the man. Completely. Maybe it was made to the person who was hurt. Jungkook stared at him. Who was hurt? Nobody answered. Then Jin suddenly said, what if we can find the old records? RM looked at him.
Yes.
Suga nodded. Completely. If the place was connected to the company, there should be archived security reports. RM immediately reached for his phone. I'll contact someone. Careful, Suga warned. Don't use the usual company channels. RM looked at him. Why? Completely. Because we don't know who has access. RM nodded and moved toward the corner of the room. J-Hope remained near the door. Taehyung stayed beside Jungkook. Jimin sat on the edge of the chair. For a few moments, the room became quiet. Then Jungkook said, completely. Jimin, yes, when you first met the man with the silver watch, what did he call me? Jimin thought carefully. He didn't use your name. Jungkook frowned. What did he call me? The promise. Jungkook's face changed. The promise? Jimin nodded. Completely. He said you'll know him when you see him, and then he told me to stay close to you. Taehyung looked at Jimin. Did he tell you to become his friend? No. Then why did you? Jimin smiled sadly. Because I liked him. Jungkook looked at him. Completely. Jimin continued. Nobody forced that part. Jungkook's expression softened. Good. Jimin looked down. That was the one thing they couldn't control. Suga glanced at them but said nothing. Suddenly RM returned. I found something. Everyone turned. Completely. What? RM held up his phone. There was an archived report from the old facility. About what? An incident. Jungkook's expression changed. The injured person? RM nodded. Possibly. Read it. RM hesitated. Completely. The report says a trainee was found unconscious near the back entrance. Jimin's breathing stopped. Name? RM looked at the screen. The name is missing. It's missing? The record was partially deleted. Suga immediately took the phone. Completely. When was the report created? Years ago. Who filed it? RM scrolled. Security. Which security officer? RM stared at the screen. That's missing too. Jin frowned. Someone deliberately erased the names. Suga nodded. Yes. Completely. Taehyung suddenly said, there was another report. RM looked at him. How do you know? I remember a red folder. Jimin looked at him. You remember it too? Yes. Where was it? In the office. Suga asked. What was inside? Completely. Jimin closed his eyes. Photographs. Of what? Jungkook looked confused. Why would they have photographs of us before we were close? Jimin shook his head. I don't know. Taehyung whispered, maybe because they were watching us. Completely. Jungkook suddenly remembered something. Wait. Everyone looked at him. I remember a camera. Jimin stared at him. In the office? Yes. Was it recording? I think so. Suga's expression changed. Then there may be archived footage. Completely. RM shook his head. If the report was deleted, the footage could be gone too. Could be, Suga said, but not necessarily. He looked at Jungkook. Do you remember where the camera was? Jungkook pointed toward the wall, above the door. Lee. Jimin suddenly whispered. There was another one. Where? Behind the mirror. Everyone looked at him. A hidden camera? Yes. Jimin remembered more. I saw a red light. Suga immediately stood up. Lee. Then someone was recording the room without telling us. Jin's expression hardened. We need that footage. RM nodded. I'll find out where the archive was stored. J-Hope suddenly looked toward the hospital hallway. Guys, everyone turned. What? Lee. Someone is outside. Suga immediately moved toward the door. Who? J-Hope looked through the small window. I don't know. Describe them. Black jacket, cap. They're standing at the end of the hall. Suga opened the door slightly. Lee. The figure immediately turned and walked away. Suga followed. Youngie, RM called. But Suga was already in the hallway. J-Hope moved after him. Taehyung stayed behind with Jungkook and Jimin. Jimin whispered, this is getting worse. Lee. Jungkook looked at him. Yes. Jimin looked surprised. You are? Of losing someone. Jimin lowered his eyes. Me, too. Jungkook reached for his hand. Then stay. I will. Down the hallway, Suga and J-Hope turned the corner. Lee. The person was gone. Suga looked around. Nothing. J-Hope pointed toward the floor. Wait. There was a small object near the wall. Suga picked it up. It was a silver watch. Not a watch itself, but the broken strap. J-Hope stared at it. Lee. That's the same. Turned it over. There was a small engraved symbol. Murray. J-Hope's eyes widened. The old facility. Suga nodded. Exactly. Then his phone vibrated. A message appeared. You the watch. Lee. Another message came immediately. Now find the man. Suga typed, where is he? The response came instantly, closer than you think. Suga looked down the corridor. Suddenly he heard footsteps behind him. He turned. Nobody was there. Lee. Then a hospital orderly walked past. Suga watched him disappear around the corner. Something about the man's movement felt familiar. J-Hope. Yes? Go back to the room. Why? Now. J-Hope hesitated. What happened? Just go. Lee. J-Hope hurried back. Suga remained in the hallway, staring at the empty corridor. Then he heard a voice behind him. You should have told them 6 months ago. Suga slowly turned. The man with the silver watch was standing at the far end of the hall. Lee. Suga's eyes narrowed. Who are you? The man smiled. You know who I am. I know the jacket. That's not enough. Then tell me. The man took one step forward. You saw me before. Suga's expression changed. At the old facility. Yes. Lee. You were there that night. Yes. Who was the injured trainee? The man's smile disappeared. You still remember. Suga's voice became cold. Who was he? Ask Jungkook. Suga stared at him. Why Jungkook? Because he made the promise. Lee. What promise? The man stepped backward. The promise to protect someone. Who? The man smiled. Jimin. Suga froze. What? The man disappeared around the corner. Suga immediately ran after him, but when he reached the end of the corridor, Lee. There was nobody there. He returned to Jungkook's room and found everyone waiting. Jimin stood beside the bed. What happened? Suga looked at Jungkook. We need to talk. Jungkook immediately knew from Suga's face that something had changed. Lee. About the man? Yes, you saw him? Suga nodded. He said something. What? Suga looked at Jimin. He said you made a promise. Jungkook's face went pale. To whom? Suga answered, to protect Jimin. Jimin stared at Jungkook. Lee. Why would you promise that before we even knew each other? Jungkook didn't answer. He couldn't. Then another memory came back. A younger Jungkook standing in the rain. Someone beside him. A voice saying, if you want him to live, Lee, promise me you will protect him. Jungkook opened his eyes. I remember Jimin stepped closer. What? Jungkook looked at him. The night at the facility. What happened? Jungkook's voice trembled. Someone was hurt. Who? I don't know. Lee. What did you promise? Jungkook stared at Jimin. I promised I would protect you. Jimin's eyes filled with tears. But you didn't know me. I know. Then why me? Jungkook shook his head. I don't know. Taehyung suddenly whispered. Lee. Maybe you did know him. Jungkook looked at him. What? Taehyung pointed toward the photograph. Look at the way you're standing. Everyone looked. Jungkook and Jimin weren't strangers in the photograph. Lee. Their bodies were angled toward each other as if they had already known one another. Jimin whispered, that's impossible. Suga looked at the photograph. Unless this wasn't the first time you met. Jungkook stared at Jimin. Have we met before? Lee. Jimin's face became pale. I don't remember. Then the hospital monitor suddenly beeped. A nurse rushed into the room. Mr. Jaeon, your blood pressure is rising. Jungkook tried to calm himself. I'm okay. But his eyes remained fixed on Jimin. Lee. What if we've met before? Jimin whispered. What if we did? Jungkook reached for his hand. Then someone made us forget. Jimin squeezed his fingers. And maybe that's why they were so afraid of us remembering. Suga looked toward the photograph. Completely. There may be one more piece. RM turned toward him. What? Suga pointed at the bottom corner of the photograph. A tiny handwritten number was visible. 7, Jin frowned. 7 what? Suga shook his head. I don't know. J-Hope suddenly said. Completely. Maybe 7 rooms. Taehyung looked at Jungkook. Or 7 recordings. Jimin whispered. Or 7 people. Jungkook looked at the number again. Then his expression changed. No. Everyone turned. What? Jungkook pointed to the photograph. Completely. It's not 7. Suga looked closer. The handwritten mark had been partially covered by an old crease. Jungkook continued. It's a date. RM leaned closer. What date? Jungkook whispered. 7 days before we met. Jimin's eyes widened. Completely. Then this photograph was taken before our first official meeting. Suga nodded slowly, which means someone arranged the meeting. Jungkook looked at Jimin. But why? Before Jimin could answer, his phone buzzed again. He looked at the screen. Completely. The message contained a photograph of the same old building. This time, the fourth person's face wasn't scratched out. It was visible. Jimin dropped the phone. Taehyung picked it up. He stared at the face and went completely silent. Jungkook asked, completely, who is it? Taehyung slowly turned the screen toward them. It was someone they had all trusted. Someone who had been standing in their circle for years. Someone who had never once appeared suspicious. And when Jimin saw the face, completely, he whispered the one sentence that made everyone understand the danger had already entered their lives long before the hospital. He was the person who told me to trust Jungkook. He was the person who told me to trust Jungkook. Jimin's voice was barely audible, but every person in the room heard it. Nobody moved. The photograph remained frozen on Taehyung's phone. Completely, showing a much younger version of the person they had trusted for years standing outside the old training facility. Jungkook stared at the screen, then at Jimin. Are you sure? Jimin swallowed hard. Yes. You recognize him? Completely. I could never forget his face. Suga stepped closer and looked at the photograph. His expression immediately changed. I know him too. RM looked at him. Who is he? Suga took a long breath. Someone who used to have access to our training schedules. Completely, Jin frowned. Suga shook his head. No, someone above him. J-Hope's eyes widened. Above him? Yes. Taehyung looked confused. Then why was he at the old facility? Suga stared at the photograph. Completely. Because he was there when everything started. Jungkook's breathing became heavier. What's his name? Suga hesitated. I don't think we should say it until we know what we're dealing with. Jungkook looked directly at him. No more secrets. Completely. Suga met his eyes. His name's Han Seo-jin. Jimin's face went pale. Han Seo-jin. He repeated the name like he had heard it in another life. Yes, he told me he could help me stay with the company. I know. Jimin looked at Suga. How do you know? Completely. Because he contacted me too. When, before you joined, Jimin stared at him. Why? He asked me whether I trusted you. Jimin looked stunned. You? Yes, what did you say? Suga answered. I said I barely knew you. Jimin looked down. Completely. And then, he told me you would become important to Jungkook. Jungkook immediately asked, how could he know that? I don't know. The room became silent again. Taehyung looked at the photograph. Maybe because he planned it. Jimin shook his head. Completely. No. Taehyung looked at him. Why not? Because that would mean our entire friendship was manipulated. Jungkook immediately answered, not necessarily. Jimin looked at him. What do you mean? Maybe the meeting was planned. Completely. And everything after that? That was ours. Jimin's eyes filled with tears. You really believe that? Jungkook nodded. Nobody could have forced me to care about you. Jimin looked away, trying to control his emotions. Completely. But they could have put us in the same room. Yes, they could have made me trust you. Maybe. They could have created the first moment. Jungkook squeezed his hand. But they couldn't create every moment after it. Jimin finally looked at him. Completely. No, those were ours. Jimin nodded. Yes, Suga watched them quietly. Then his phone vibrated again. Everyone looked at it. Another message. You are finally remembering. Suga read the next line. Now ask Jungkook about the night he saved Jimin. Completely. Jimin looked at him. Saved me? Jungkook's expression became confused. I don't remember. Suga looked at the message. Maybe that's what they erased. RM asked. What night? Suga shook his head. We need to find out. Completely. Jungkook closed his eyes. Wait, Jimin moved closer. What? I remember a door. Where? The old facility. What was behind it? Jungkook breathed heavily. You, Jimin froze. Me, you were inside. What was I doing? Crying. Completely. Jimin's face changed. I was crying. Jungkook nodded slowly. You were sitting on the floor. Was someone with me? Yes. Who? Jungkook pressed his fingers against his forehead. I can't see the face. Taehyung suddenly spoke. I can. Completely. Everyone turned. You remember? Taehyung nodded. There was a man outside the door. The silver watch? Yes. Jimin whispered, what did he do? Taehyung's voice became quiet. He locked the door. Jimin covered his mouth. Why? Completely. Because you wanted to leave. Jungkook stared at Taehyung and I opened it. Taehyung nodded. Yes, how? You found a key. Jungkook looked shocked. Where? On the man's desk. Jimin suddenly remembered something. I heard someone say my name. Completely. Jungkook looked at him. Who? What did he say? Jimin whispered. He said I was supposed to be useful. Suga's expression hardened. Useful for what? Jimin shook his head. I don't know. Jungkook suddenly remembered the next part. Completely. He said something about a promise. Jimin looked at him. What promise? Jungkook answered slowly. He said if I took you out of that room, I would have to protect you. Jimin stared at him. And you did? Yes, you were just a trainee. Yes. Completely. Why would you risk yourself? Jungkook looked at Jimin. Because you were scared. Jimin's tears fell. That's it. Jungkook nodded. That's all I remember. Suga looked toward RM. Then the promise wasn't about some future relationship. Completely. RM's understood. It was about getting Jimin out of that room. Exactly. Jimin wiped his face. But why did they want me inside? Nobody answered. Then Jin said, maybe because you saw something. Jimin slowly nodded. The injured trainee. Completely. Taehyung looked at him. Yes, I saw him. You did, and Jungkook saw him too. Yes. Suga asked, what happened to him? Jimin shook his head. I don't know. Taehyung whispered, he died. The room went completely silent. Jimin looked at him. Completely. What? Taehyung's eyes filled with tears. I remember now. Jungkook stared at him. You're sure? Taehyung nodded. He didn't survive. Jimin covered his mouth. No. Suga asked, how do you know? Because I saw the ambulance. Completely. J-Hope looked horrified. Suga answered, because someone erased it. RM looked at Jimin. And you were a witness. Jimin nodded slowly. That's why they wanted me quiet. Jungkook looked at him. Completely. And they used me to keep you safe. Jimin stared at Jungkook. They made you promise. Yes, but then why did they let us stay together? Suga answered, because they believed the memory was gone. Taehyung suddenly said, completely. Or because they needed us together for something else. Everyone looked at him. What? Taehyung pointed at the photograph. Look at the fourth person. They all stared. He's not looking at Jimin. Then who? Jungkook. Jungkook's face changed. Completely. He was watching, nodded. Exactly. Jimin whispered, maybe Jungkook was the real witness. Suga shook his head. Both of you were. Then why target Taehyung? Taehyung answered quietly, because I remembered. Jimin looked at him. Completely. When? Tonight? Before the accident? A little. Jimin's eyes widened. You remembered something before Jungkook fell? Taehyung nodded. I saw the man with the silver watch backstage. Jungkook stared at him. You recognized him? Yes. Completely. Why didn't you tell us? Taehyung lowered his head. Because I thought I was imagining it. Jimin whispered, and then I accused you. Yes, because they knew you would be blamed. Yes. Jimin stepped closer. I'm sorry. Taehyung looked at him. Completely. I know. I shouldn't have done it. I know. Can you forgive me? Taehyung was silent for several seconds. Then he said, I'm trying. Jimin nodded. That's enough. Jungkook watched them. Then the door suddenly opened. RM looked toward it. Completely. Nobody was there. Only a small envelope lay on the floor. Suga picked it up carefully. Another message. Inside was a USB drive. J-Hope looked nervous. Do we really want to open that? Suga nodded. Yes. He connected it to a laptop. Completely. One video file appeared. The date was from years ago. Jungkook stared at the timestamp. That's the night. Jimin sat beside him. The video started. It showed the old training facility. The camera angle was from the hallway. Completely. A young Jimin appeared on screen. He was being led toward the office by Han Seojin. Then a young Jungkook appeared. He was running toward them. Taehyung was behind him. Suga leaned closer. This footage was never supposed to exist. On the screen, completely, the door opened. Jimin entered. Han Seojin followed. Jungkook reached the hallway and stopped. He watched through the glass. Then the injured trainee appeared. He collapsed. Jimin screamed. Jungkook rushed toward the door. Completely. Han Seojin turned toward the camera, and for the first time his face was completely visible. He looked directly into the lens. Then he said something. Suga increased the volume. The man's voice came through clearly. If they remember this night, Wheatley, everything falls apart. Jungkook's face became pale. The video continued. Han Seojin looked directly toward young Jungkook and said, "You will forget her." Jimin suddenly froze. "Her?" Jungkook looked at him. "What?" The recording continued. Wheatley, "And when you meet her again, you will protect her." Jimin whispered, "Her?" Taehyung looked at the screen. Who was he talking about? Then the video showed something none of them expected. A fourth young trainee walked into the frame. It was a girl. Wheatley. She was standing beside Jimin. She looked frightened. Han Seojin turned toward her. "You're next." The video abruptly ended. Nobody spoke. Jimin stared at the black screen. "Who is she?" Jungkook looked at him. "I don't know." Suga rewound the video. Wheatley. "Wait." He paused on the frame. "Look at her necklace." Jimin leaned closer. The girl was wearing a small pendant shaped like a star. Jungkook suddenly grabbed his own shirt. Around his neck was a similar pendant. Jimin stared at it. Wheatley. "Jungkook." Jungkook slowly pulled the necklace out. The same star-shaped pendant hung there. Taehyung's eyes widened. "You've had that for years." Jungkook nodded. "My mother gave it to me." Suga looked at the photograph. Wheatley. "Then maybe it wasn't originally yours." Jungkook froze. "What?" Suga pointed to the girl. "She has the same pendant." Jimin whispered, "Maybe she gave it to you." Jungkook stared at the screen. Another memory suddenly hit him. Wheatley. A little girl standing in the rain. She was crying. She removed the pendant from her neck and placed it in his hand. Then she said, "Promise you'll remember me." Jungkook opened his eyes. "I remember." Everyone stared at him. Jimin asked, "Who was she?" Wheatley. Jungkook looked at the frozen image. "I don't know her name." Suga said, "But Han Seojin does." Jungkook stared at the screen, and if she's still alive, Jimin whispered, "Then she may be the reason all of this started." Wheatley. Before anyone could say anything else, Jungkook's phone rang. The caller ID showed an unknown number. He answered. A woman's voice spoke softly. "Jungkook?" He froze. "Who is this?" The woman whispered, "You promised you would remember me." Wheatley. Jimin's eyes widened. The call continued. "And now you finally have." Then the line went dead. Jungkook stared at the phone. Nobody moved. Then Suga noticed something on the laptop screen. The video had started playing again by itself. This time, Wheatley. The final frame showed the mysterious girl standing outside the old facility years later, and beneath the image was a date from only 3 days ago. She was alive. She had been watching them. And she was coming back. The room remained completely silent after the call ended. Jungkook was still holding the phone against his ear, even though there was no longer anyone speaking on the other side. Jimin watched him carefully. "Jungkook." No response. "Jungkook?" Wheatley. "Look at me." Jungkook slowly lowered the phone. His expression had changed. He wasn't confused anymore. He looked like someone who had just found a piece of his past and realized he had been searching for it without knowing. "She said I promised her." Wheatley. Jimin nodded. "I heard. She said she would come back. I heard that too." Jungkook looked at the laptop. The frozen image of the girl remained on the screen. "I remember her now." Taehyung stepped closer. "Who is she?" Jungkook shook his head. Wheatley. "I don't know her name." "But you remember her?" "Yes." Suga asked, "What do you remember?" Jungkook closed his eyes. "Rain." He paused. "She was standing outside the building." Jimin listened closely. "What else?" "She was crying." "Why?" Wheatley. "Because someone told her she couldn't go home." Jimin's expression tightened. "Who?" Han Seojin. Suga immediately looked at RM. "Then she was one of the trainees involved in the incident." RM nodded. "But if she was a trainee," Wheatley, "there should be records." Suga looked at the laptop. "Unless someone removed them." Jin spoke quietly. "Like they removed the injured trainee's record." "Exactly." J-Hope looked toward the hospital door. Wheatley. "How do we know she's actually trying to help us?" Nobody answered. Taehyung finally said, "We don't." Jungkook looked at him. "But she knew about the promise. That doesn't prove she's on our side." Jimin nodded. "She's right." Wheatley. Jungkook looked at Jimin. "You think she's dangerous?" "I think we've been manipulated too many times to trust someone just because they know our past." Suga nodded. "Jimin is right." Jungkook looked down at his hands. "Then what do we do?" Wheatley. RM answered, "We ask her to meet us somewhere controlled." Suga shook his head. "Not yet." "Why?" "Because she called Jungkook directly. She knows he's in this hospital. She knows he's awake. She knows what room he's in." Jin looked toward the door. Wheatley. "Meaning she could be watching us right now." Everyone became still. Jimin immediately looked toward the window. Taehyung checked the hallway. Suga walked toward the curtains and closed them completely. Nobody moves alone. J-Hope locked the door. Completely. RM turned off the laptop camera. We need to assume every device is compromised. Jungkook suddenly laughed quietly. Everyone looked at him. What's funny? Jimin asked. Jungkook shook his head. Nothing. Then why are you laughing? Completely. Because I've spent years thinking my memories were mine. He looked at the others. Now I'm not even sure about that. Jimin moved closer. Your memories are still yours. Jungkook looked at him. How can you be sure? Because I remember you. Completely. Jungkook stared at him. What? Jimin continued. They can erase photographs. They can manipulate recordings. They can change schedules. They can even make fake voices. But they can't change what I felt when I met you. Jungkook's eyes softened. Completely. Jimin continued. I know I trusted you because I wanted to, not because someone told me to. Jungkook nodded slowly. You're right, and you protected me because you chose to. Yes. So don't let them take that from us too. Taehyung looked away. Completely, giving them privacy. Suga watched quietly, but his phone suddenly vibrated. He checked the screen. Another message had arrived. Good, now you remember. Suga's face hardened. He showed it to RM. The next message arrived almost immediately. Completely. But you remember the wrong girl. What does that mean? Suga shook his head. Another message appeared. The girl in the video was not the one Jungkook promised to protect. Jungkook read the message and felt his stomach drop. Completely. Then who did I promise to protect? No answer came. Instead, a photograph appeared. This one was different. It showed the same old facility. The photograph had been taken on the night of the incident. Jungkook was standing near the entrance. Completely. Jimin was beside him. Taehyung was further behind, but there was another person standing between them. A young woman. She wasn't the girl from the video. Jimin stared at the image. There are two girls. Suga nodded. Yes. Completely. Jungkook stared at the second girl. Something inside him shifted. That's her. Jimin looked at him. You remember? Jungkook nodded. That's the person I promised. Taehyung looked at the photograph. Then who was the girl in the video? Completely. Jungkook shook his head. I don't know. Suga zoomed in. The second girl was holding a small envelope. What's that? Jimin leaned closer. Maybe a letter. Jungkook whispered, I remember the envelope. What was inside? A name. Whose? Completely. Jungkook stared at the image. Mine. Everyone froze. Your name? Yes. Why would she have yours? She asked me to write it. Jimin looked confused. When? Jungkook closed his eyes. Before the accident. He paused. Completely. She said if anything happened to her, I had to find someone. Suga asked, who? Jungkook shook his head. I can't remember. Jimin suddenly looked toward the laptop. Wait. He pointed at the photograph. The envelope has a symbol. Suga enlarged it. Completely. It was the same star symbol from Jungkook's necklace. RM immediately said, that's not a coincidence. Suga nodded. No. Jimin looked at Jungkook. Your necklace. Jungkook touched it. It came from her. Then why did your mother say it was hers? Completely. Jungkook's expression changed. She never said it was hers. Jimin stared at him. What? She only told me to keep it safe. Did she tell you where it came from? No. Suga's eyes narrowed. Then the necklace was part of the secret. Completely. Jungkook suddenly remembered another detail. There was a second pendant. Jimin asked where on the girl. Did she give it to someone? Yes. Who? Jungkook's eyes widened. Taehyung. Taehyung froze. Me? You had it. Completely. Taehyung reached toward his neck instinctively. I don't have anything. Not now. Then where is it? Jungkook shook his head. I don't know. Suga looked at him. Think. Jungkook closed his eyes again. A memory appeared. Taehyung was younger. Completely. Standing near the back entrance. The girl handed him a small star-shaped pendant. She whispered something. Taehyung took it. Then Han Seojin appeared. The memory disappeared. Jungkook opened his eyes. She gave you something. Taehyung looked stunned. Completely. I don't remember. Jimin whispered, maybe they erased your memory too. Taehyung looked at Suga. Then maybe there's a reason I was targeted tonight. Suga nodded. Yes. Jimin suddenly realized something. Wait. Everyone looked at him. What? Completely. The attack wasn't meant for Jungkook, we know. And it wasn't just meant for Taehyung. Suga looked at him. Explain. They wanted Taehyung blamed. Yes. They wanted me to fight with him. Yes. They wanted Jungkook to distrust me. Yes. Completely. Jimin looked at Taehyung. But why would they need all of that? Taehyung stared at him. To separate us. Why? Because together we remember. Jimin nodded slowly. Exactly. Jungkook looked at them. Completely. Then the entire accident was designed to make us turn against each other before we remembered the past. Suga said, and it almost worked. Jimin lowered his head. I slapped myself emotionally every time I thought about blaming Taehyung. Completely. Taehyung gave a faint, sad smile. You did worse than that. Jimin looked at him. I know, but you apologized. Because you didn't deserve it, Taehyung nodded. That's enough for now. Jungkook looked at both of them. We're not breaking apart. Completely. RM nodded. No matter what comes next. Jin added, nobody gets isolated. J-Hope said, nobody keeps secrets alone. Suga looked at them, agreed for the first time. Completely. The 7 members stood together in the hospital room without suspicion between them. But then the phone rang again. Jungkook looked at the screen. Same unknown number. Jimin immediately said, don't answer. Jungkook looked at him. I have to. Why? Completely. Because if she's really the one from my memory, she may know what happened. Suga nodded. Put it on speaker, Jungkook answered. Hello? A woman's voice appeared. You're remembering. Jungkook said, who are you? You know me. Completely. I don't know your name. You knew it once. Tell me. Silence. Then she said, my name is Ara. Jimin's face changed. Ara. Jungkook looked at him. You know that name? Jimin nodded slowly. I heard it before. Suga looked at Jimin. Where? Completely. Han Seojin mentioned it. When? Jimin struggled to remember. The night at the facility. Ara's voice suddenly became serious. Then you remember more than you think. Jimin stepped closer to the phone. What happened that night? Ara answered. Completely. Jimin closed his eyes. We know. No, her voice became colder. You know someone died. You don't know who killed him. Jungkook asked, was it Han Seojin? No, everyone froze. Suga asked, then who? Ara didn't answer. Completely. Jungkook said, tell us. I can't. Why? Because he's still with you. Jimin's blood ran cold. What? Ara continued. The person who caused the accident tonight is not outside the group. Suga immediately looked at every member. RM Jin. J-Hope. Completely. Jimin. Jungkook himself. Ara whispered, he's inside the circle. The call ended. Nobody moved. Jimin looked at Jungkook. Who? Jungkook slowly looked around the room. I don't know. Suga's phone vibrated. One final message appeared. Completely. You've been looking for the man with the silver watch. Another line appeared. But the man with the silver watch is only his assistant. Suga stared at the screen. Then another line appeared. Completely. The real person is the one knew Jungkook would survive. Suga's face went pale. Jungkook noticed. Hyung? Suga didn't respond. What is it? Suga slowly lifted the phone. The final message was visible. Completely. Ask Suga why he never told you sign the original contract. Everyone turned toward Suga. His expression collapsed. Jimin whispered, Yoongi. Suga looked at them. For months he had carried the secret alone. Now there was nowhere left to hide. Completely. I know who signed it. RM stepped closer. Who? Suga stared at Jungkook. The person who approved the old security operation. Jungkook asked, who? Suga took a breath. It was someone from inside our own management structure. Jin whispered. Completely. Name. Suga looked at each member one by one. I never told you because I was afraid of what would happen if you found out. Jimin's voice trembled. Tell us. Suga finally answered. Completely. The contract was approved by someone who still has access to your schedules, your medical information, and your movements. Jungkook's eyes widened. Who? Suga opened his mouth. But before he could say the name, Completely, the hospital monitor suddenly went silent. Jungkook looked down. The screen had gone black. Every light in the room flickered. And then a voice came from the speaker hidden somewhere above the ceiling. Don't let Suga finish that sentence. Completely. The 7 members froze. Because whoever was listening had just revealed something far more terrifying than any photograph, any recording, or any old secret. They were not outside the hospital room anymore. The voice from the ceiling disappeared, but nobody moved. Jungkook stared at the dead monitor while Jimin remained beside him, still holding his hand. Taehyung immediately looked upward. Where is that speaker? Suga didn't answer. Completely. He was already searching the walls, his eyes moving from the ceiling to the medical equipment and then toward the ventilation panel. Whisper. Everyone stay together. Jin locked the door again. J-Hope moved the chairs away from the walls. Completely. But Jungkook suddenly noticed something. Wait, everyone turned toward him. What? Jungkook pointed at the monitor. It's back! The screen flickered once. Then the heart rate line appeared again. Completely. But beneath it was something that shouldn't have been there. A small countdown, 9 minutes and 58 seconds. Jimin stared at it. What's counting down? Suga stepped closer. I don't know. The numbers continued falling. 9 minutes. Completely. 40 seconds. 30. Jungkook looked at Suga. You were about to tell us who signed the contract. Suga nodded. Yes, tell us now. Suga hesitated. If I say the name, whoever is listening will know we figured it out. Completely. Jungkook's expression hardened. They already know. JIMIN squeezed his hand. He's right. Suga looked at the others. Then we need to get out of this room. RM shook his head. The hallway could be compromised. Then where? J-Hope asked. Completely. The stairwell. Jin looked at Jungkook. Can he move? The doctor had warned that Jungkook needed rest, but staying in the room had suddenly become more dangerous than leaving it. Jungkook slowly pushed himself upright. Pain shot through his body. Completely. JIMIN immediately supported him. Careful, I'm fine. You're not. I can walk. Taehyung moved to his other side. Then we'll help you. Jungkook nodded. Suga grabbed the laptop, the recording device, and the photographs. Completely. RM took the hospital documents. Jin opened the door a few centimeters. The hallway appeared empty. Too empty. Let's go, Suga whispered. They stepped into the corridor. The lights were still flickering. Completely. Jungkook leaned against JIMIN and Taehyung as they moved slowly. They had barely taken 10 steps when a hospital announcement came over the speakers. Code 7. Restricted access. Everyone stopped. Suga looked upward. Completely. That's not a normal announcement. RM nodded. No, the corridor doors automatically locked. Jin tried the nearest one. They're sealed. J-Hope checked another. Same. JIMIN looked at Jungkook. We're trapped. Jungkook shook his head. No. Completely. What? They want us to think we're trapped. Suga looked at him. Then what's the exit? Jungkook stared at the corridor map. There. He pointed toward a service passage. That goes behind the emergency wing. Suga checked the map. He's right. Completely. They moved quickly, but before they reached the passage, a figure appeared at the end of the hallway. Black jacket, cap, silver watch. Everyone stopped. JIMIN's breathing caught. It's him. The man didn't move. He simply stood there watching them. Completely. Suga stepped forward. Who are you? The man smiled. You already know. Jungkook looked at him. You're the man from the old facility. Yes. You were there when JIMIN was locked inside. Yes. You were there before the accident tonight. Yes. Completely. Then tell me who gave you the order. The man looked at Jungkook. You already know the answer. Say it. I can't. Suga stepped forward. You will. The man smiled. No, Yoongi, you won't. Suga froze. The man continued. Completely. Because you still haven't told them the most important part. Suga's expression tightened. What part? Why you agreed to protect the secret. RM looked at Suga. What is he talking about? Suga didn't answer. JIMIN stared at him. Yoongi. Completely. The man laughed quietly. He didn't protect you because he trusted you. Jungkook looked at Suga. Then why? The man answered, because Suga was protecting himself. Suga's face hardened. Enough. You know what happened. I said enough. Completely. You were there too. Jungkook stared at him. Hyung. Suga looked at Jungkook. I was there. JIMIN's eyes widened. At the old facility. Suga nodded. Yes. Taehyung whispered, you saw the injured trainee. Yes. You knew what happened. Yes. Completely. JIMIN's voice broke. Why didn't you tell us? Suga looked devastated. Because I was told that if I spoke, the entire team would be destroyed. The man with the silver watch smiled. And you believed him. Suga looked at him with anger. Completely. You threatened me. I warned you. You threatened everyone, and you still kept silent. Suga lowered his head. Yes. Jungkook stepped closer despite his pain. What happened that night? Suga looked at him. Someone was supposed to disappear. Completely. JIMIN froze. Disappear? Yes. Who? Suga stared at JIMIN. You. JIMIN's face went blank. Jungkook immediately stepped in front of him. No. Suga continued. They wanted JIMIN removed from the company before he became important to you. Completely. JIMIN whispered, why? Because you had seen something you weren't supposed to see. The man with the silver watch interrupted, and Jungkook wasn't supposed to save you. Jungkook looked at him. But I did. Yes. And you failed. Completely. The man's smile disappeared. No, he reached into his jacket. Taehyung immediately moved in front of Jungkook. Don't. The man stopped. He slowly pulled out a small photograph instead of a weapon. He held it up. You think tonight was a failure? Completely. Nobody answered. He dropped the photograph onto the floor. Suga picked it up. His face changed instantly. No. RM asked, what is it? Suga couldn't speak. JIMIN took the photograph. It showed Jungkook lying unconscious backstage after the accident. Completely. But the timestamp was wrong. It was dated 10 minutes before Jungkook fell. JIMIN looked horrified. How? Suga stared at it. This photograph was taken before the accident. Jungkook whispered, then how did they know I would fall? The man smiled. Completely. because we knew exactly where you would be. Taehyung's expression changed. The stage positions, yes. The equipment, yes. The drink, yes. The IV, yes. Jimin stared at him. Everything was planned. The man nodded. Everything. Completely. Jungkook looked at Jimin. Even the argument, the man smiled. Especially the argument, Jimin's face collapsed. You wanted me to blame Taehyung. Yes. You wanted Jungkook to hate me. Yes. Why? The man looked at Jungkook. Completely. Because when Jungkook trusts Jimin, he becomes impossible to control. Jimin stared at Jungkook. What? The man continued. Jimin is the only person who can make him ignore orders. Jungkook's eyes hardened. Completely. And that's why you tried to separate us. Exactly. Jimin whispered. All this time. You were the weakness we couldn't control. Jungkook looked at Jimin. No. Jimin looked at him. What? You're not my weakness. The man laughed. Completely. Then what is he? Jungkook answered without hesitation. My choice. Jimin's eyes filled with tears. Taehyung looked at Jungkook, then stepped beside him. And we're done letting you choose for us. RM joined them, then Jin, Jape, Suga, one by one. Completely. The 7 members stood together in the corridor. The man looked at them and smiled. You think standing together changes anything? Suga answered. It changes everything. The man suddenly pressed something on his wrist. Completely. Every light in the corridor went out. Jimin grabbed Jungkook's arm. Taehyung shouted, Stay together! A loud alarm started. Then the emergency doors opened one after another. When the lights returned, the man was gone. Completely. But he had left something behind, a small envelope. Suga picked it up. Inside was a single sheet of paper. At the top was a name. Not Han Seojin, not the mysterious woman, not the injured trainee. Completely. It was the name of someone who had been standing beside them throughout the entire night. Suga read it once. Then again, his hands began shaking. Jungkook looked at him. Who? Suga slowly raised his eyes. I can't tell you. Completely. Jungkook's voice became cold. Why? Suga looked toward the 7 members. Because the person controlling this, he stopped. Jimin whispered, What? Suga finished is one of us. Nobody spoke. The hospital alarm continued screaming around them. Completely. Jungkook stared at every member. Jimin's Taehyung stared at RM. Jin looked at J-Hope. J-Hope looked at Suga, and Suga kept the paper hidden in his hand. Then his phone vibrated one final time. He looked down. One message appeared. Completely. If you tell them his name, Jungkook will never leave this hospital. Suga's eyes widened. Jungkook noticed. Hyung. Suga slowly looked up, and this time he didn't look afraid for himself. He looked afraid for Jungkook. Completely. Because he had finally realized the truth. The person they had been searching for wasn't trying to get into the hospital. The person had never needed to enter at all. They had been there from the beginning.